Hey everyone. Welcome back to Supreme Harry. Get ready for an amazing tale. Harry collapsed at Gringotts and discovered he's heir to 22 powerful houses and cursed king of Britain. Smash that like button and subscribe for more. Here we go. Chapter 1, The Fall. The summer had been relentless. Harry had spent 6 weeks at Privet Drive doing what he always did, enduring. Dudley's gang had mostly left him alone since the Dementor incident the previous year, which meant the house itself had become the battleground. Vernon's silences were architectural things, built wall by wall each morning over breakfast until they pressed against every surface of the kitchen. Petunia moved around Harry like he was a stain she'd learned to navigate. It was the particular cruelty of being tolerated rather than hated. Hate, at least, acknowledged you existed. He'd written to Ron and Hermione. Short letters, careful ones, because Hedwig was being intercepted and he knew it. He could feel the order's watch on the house the way you feel someone standing behind you in a dark room, present, invisible, and not entirely reassuring. On the morning of July 31st, his 15th birthday, he woke up at 5:30, lay on his back staring at a water stain on the ceiling, and felt, with a clarity that surprised him, that something was about to break. Not in a bad way. Or not only in a bad way. He got dressed. He went downstairs. He found a letter on the kitchen table addressed in the cramped, precise handwriting of Gringotts Bank, and for a moment he just stood there in the grey early light reading the envelope, because nobody had ever sent him post on his birthday that wasn't from a friend. Mr. H. J. Potter, account holder, urgent and time-sensitive, required attendance at your earliest convenience, matters pertaining to the Potter estate, outstanding inheritances, and legally mandated disclosures which have been delayed beyond the statutory period permitted by goblin banking law. There was a second line, smaller, at the bottom of the formal letterhead. We do not make this request lightly. Please come soon. He read it 3 times. Then he folded it, tucked it into his jeans pocket, and went to make himself toast, because whatever was in that letter, he was going to face it on a full stomach. Getting to London was its own small adventure. He couldn't apparate. The night bus was technically an option, but the last thing he needed was Stan Shunpike broadcasting his location to every wizard in Britain. In the end he walked to the train station, bought a ticket with the muggle money he kept in a biscuit tin under a loose board, and sat on the 7:14 to London Paddington watching the suburbs unspool into the city like thread off a spool. He almost wrote to Dumbledore. He had his quill out, the small notebook he kept in his jacket, and he sat there for a good 10 minutes while the train rattled through reading, and then he put the quill away. Not out of rebellion, exactly. More because the letter said outstanding inheritances and matters that have been delayed beyond the statutory period, and something in the back of his mind, some quiet, watchful part of him that had been growing sharper since Cedric died, told him that he should see what was behind that door before he told anyone else it was open. He arrived at the Leaky Cauldron just before 9. Tom was wiping down the bar and greeted him with the sort of overenthusiastic nod that meant he'd almost certainly send word to someone within the hour. Harry waved, walked through to Diagon Alley, and kept his head down. The alley was quiet at this hour. A few witches with shopping baskets, a wizard arguing with a talking hat in a shop window, 2 goblins in Gringotts livery walking purposefully in the direction of the bank itself. The white marble building rose at the end of the alley like a very clean threat, its bronze doors open, the early morning light catching the gold lettering of the warning poem above the entrance in a way that made it look more like prophecy than cautionary verse. Enter, stranger, but take heed. Harry had always found Gringotts slightly magnificent. The goblins didn't pretend to be friendly. They didn't perform service with a smile. They were efficient and proud, and they did not particularly care whether you liked them, which Harry had always found, privately, rather refreshing. He pushed through the doors, crossed the marble entrance hall, and joined the short queue at the front desk. The goblin behind the counter didn't look up when Harry reached him. Name: Harry Potter. I received a letter, Potter. The goblin looked up at that. His eyes were sharp and still, and he held them on Harry for a moment longer than was strictly professional. Yes. You're expected. Please wait here. He disappeared through a door behind the counter. Harry stood at the desk and looked around the hall. The other goblins were going about their business, ferrying documents and escorting clients toward the vault carts. The great chandeliers above threw gold light across everything, and the air smelled of stone and metal and something underneath that, something older, like the air deep in a cave system, where water has been moving through rock for 10,000 years. He was studying the ceiling fresco, a battle scene, goblins and dragons and what appeared to be a wizard being very dramatically wrong about something, when the pain hit him. It wasn't a headache. It was total. It went from 0 to everything in under a second, and Harry's knees simply stopped working. He heard himself make a sound he'd never made before, something between a gasp and a word, and then the marble floor came up to meet him and the chandeliers spun overhead like falling stars, and all the sound in Gringotts, the clink of coins, the scratch of quills, the rumble of the cart system underground, all of it dropped away into a deep and complete silence. The last thing he saw before the darkness took him was a goblin crouching beside him, not with concern exactly, but with something that looked like recognition. He came back to consciousness in stages. First the sound, low voices, the particular resonance of a stone room, a crackling fire that he could feel on his left side. Then smell, wood smoke, something medicinal, parchment. Then the specific and very persuasive ache of lying on a surface that was comfortable enough to have been intentional. He opened his eyes. The room was nothing like the public areas of Gringotts. It was smaller and warmer, the walls lined floor to ceiling with shelves of scrolls and ledgers, the fireplace large and deeply set into the far wall. The furniture was heavy, dark wood, built for function rather than comfort but managing both. Two goblins stood near the door in low conversation. A third sat at the desk opposite, watching him with the particular patience of someone who has been waiting for a very long time. This goblin was old. Not in the way that some of the teller goblins were old, not wiry and sharp-eyed with the energy of bankers. This one was old in the way that mountains are old, something in the stillness of him, in the weight of his attention. He wore robes that were plainly cut but exquisitely made, deep charcoal with silver at the collar, and on his desk there was no money and no ledger. Just a single scroll, unrolled, and a cup of something steaming. "You're awake," the goblin said. His voice was low and unhurried. "Good. My name is Ragnarok. I am the director of Gringotts, and I have been waiting to have this conversation with you for 3 years. Harry sat up slowly. His head felt strange, not painful anymore, more like the aftermath of pain, that hollow clarity. He was on a low couch against the side wall, a blanket over him that he didn't remember acquiring. His glasses were on the small table beside him, folded neatly. He put them on and looked at Ragnarok properly. "What happened to me?" "Your inheritance happened to you." Ragnarok picked up the scroll from his desk and held it with both hands, not opening it, just holding it. More specifically, an inheritance that has been suppressed by magical contract for the past 14 years attempted to assert itself. Suppression of that magnitude, held for that long against a magical core as significant as yours, creates pressure. You walked into Gringotts, which is, architecturally and magically, one of the most inheritance-reactive locations in Britain, and the suppression collapsed. Harry stared at him. "Someone suppressed my inheritance." "Several people. Over several years. Through several mechanisms." Ragnarok set the scroll down and folded his hands. "Mr. Potter, before we proceed, I need to ask you a question, and I need an honest answer. Do you currently have a magical guardian, a sworn oath keeper, or any individual who holds legal proxy over your person or your magical affairs?" "Dumbledore," Harry said. He was named my guardian when my parents died. He placed me with the Dursleys." Ragnarok's expression did something subtle and controlled. "Albus Dumbledore holds magical guardianship over your person. He does not, by your parents' will, hold proxy over your estates. That distinction will matter shortly." He paused. "Are you aware of the contents of your parents' will?" "No." "Are you aware that a will was filed with the ministry following your parents' deaths in 1981? No. Are you aware that the will has never been executed? That its contents have been sealed under a ministry order of wartime emergency, a classification which expired in 1984 and was illegally renewed 3 times since. The room was very quiet. Harry could hear the fire. He could hear his own breathing. No, he said. I wasn't aware of any of that. Ragnar nodded, as if this confirmed something he had already known. He stood, he was short, as all goblins were, but standing he had a gravity that seemed to take up more space than his height should have allowed, and moved to the far shelf. He pulled a ledger from the middle of a row and carried it back to the desk. Gringotts is not subject to ministry seal orders, he said, sitting again. We follow goblin banking law, which predates British wizarding law by approximately 4 centuries. Under our law, when an account holder enters Gringotts premises and a suppressed inheritance triggers, we are legally obligated, not permitted, obligated, to conduct a full inheritance reading. We are also legally protected from any ministry interference in that process. He opened the ledger and turned it to face Harry. This is the current state of your accounts, Mr. Potter, with the suppression removed. Harry leaned forward. The ledger was written in a neat, precise hand that he recognized as goblin script, and the figures in it were so large they momentarily failed to resolve into meaning. Not just galleons. Not just the main Potter vault and the trust vault he'd been drawing on for school supplies for 4 years. There were columns. 17 columns. Property holdings, political holdings, financial instruments in both wizarding and muggle markets, artifact inventories, library catalogs, and at the very bottom of the page, in different ink, an entry simply labeled sovereign claims with a figure beside it that had no unit of currency at all. Just a small, carefully drawn crown. I don't understand this, Harry said. You will. Ragnar turned the ledger back. We'll go through it properly. But first, your physical state. The collapse was a result of the suppression breaking, but there were secondary effects. Your magical core has been constricted, for want of a better word. It will expand over the next several days. You may experience headaches, temperature fluctuations, and what you might describe as your magic feeling loud. This is normal. It will settle. He paused. You should also know that the 2 healers I called to examine you while you were unconscious found 3 active suppression charms on your person, 1 tied to your blood, 1 tied to your core, 1 tied to something they described as your sovereign resonance, which is a term I will explain shortly. All 3 have now been removed by Gringotts' right of inheritance protection. Harry sat back against the couch. 3 charms. On him. Without his knowledge. He turned the fact over in his mind and felt, not for the first time that summer, that quietly gathering sensation of something breaking open. Who put them there? Ragnar picked up the scroll again. This time he unrolled it slightly. The blood suppression was applied in 1981, within 3 days of your parents' deaths. The caster's signature is incomplete. Deliberately obfuscated. The core suppression was applied in 1991, before your first term at Hogwarts. The sovereign resonance suppression was applied in 1993, during your 2nd year. He looked up. We have identified 1 caster with certainty. The 1991 and 1993 suppressions share a magical signature. The same hand. Whose? Albus Dumbledore. Harry heard it. He sat with it. He was aware, distantly, that a different version of himself, the version from even 1 year ago, would have rejected this immediately. Would have defended Dumbledore, found a reason, constructed an explanation. He didn't do that. He said, what was the sovereign resonance suppression supposed to prevent? Ragnar set the scroll down. That, he said, is the interesting question. Ragnar was not, Harry quickly learned, a goblin who wasted words. He was precise and economical, and when he explained things he did so in straight lines, without ornament. He summoned tea, proper tea, not as a gesture of hospitality but because it was mid-morning and tea was rational, and he talked for the better part of an hour, and when he was finished Harry sat in the warmth of the fire and understood, for the first time in his life, the actual dimensions of what he was. The Potter family was old. He'd known that. Pure blood, going back centuries, a family of reasonable wealth and some distinction. What he hadn't known, what had been hidden, suppressed, sealed away behind ministry orders and Dumbledore's careful management, was that Potter was only the most visible thread of a much older tapestry. His mother's line. That was the first surprise. Lily Evans, Lily Potter, had not been Muggle-born in the way that the wizarding world understood Muggle-born. She had been what the old texts called a reclamation, a magical child born to a Muggle family because their bloodline had been magically dormant for generations, the power lying latent through successive generations until the conditions were right and it came roaring back. What was lying dormant in the Evans line was not ordinary magic. Lily was the last heir of the House of Peveril. Harry had heard the name before, he'd read it in a Hogwarts textbook in passing, some reference to the Deathly Hallows, Three Brothers, a fairy tale. What the textbook hadn't said was that the Peveril line had not simply died out. It had gone dormant, hidden, its last confirmed descendant dying without heirs apparent in the 15th century. The title and its associated magical claims had been held in abeyance ever since, waiting for a reclamation. The Peveril seat carries 3 subsidiary houses, Ragnarok said, unrolling the scroll further. Gaunt, by conquest and magical compact, though the living Gaunt line has forfeited its claims through dark binding. Slytherin, by ancient alliance, Salazar Slytherin and Ignotus Peveril were bound brothers, a magical compact that transferred heritable rights upon the extinction of the Slytherin male line, which occurred in 1792. And Emrys. Harry looked up sharply at that last name. As in Merlin, Ragnarok said, with the particular tone of someone confirming something they know will be momentarily difficult to process. Merlin Ambrosius, who styled himself Emrys in the old tongue. He had no biological heirs. He created a magical compact of succession in the year 483 CE, binding his title and magical legacy to the royal house of Britain, to pass to the sovereign in each age who carried the right resonance. A pause. You carry the resonance, Mr. Potter. You have, apparently, since birth. I'm heir to Merlin, Harry said flatly. Among others. How many others? Ragnarok rolled the scroll out to its full length. It was considerably longer than Harry had expected, the bottom of it curling off the edge of the desk and onto the floor. He turned it around so Harry could read it, and Harry leaned forward and began to read, and as he read the list, 22 names in total, noble and most ancient houses, some of which he recognized and some of which he'd never heard, he felt something in the room change, some quality of the air, some sense of pressure and weight and presence that was not quite sound and not quite light and was entirely, unmistakably, him. The fire burned a shade brighter. The candles on Ragnarok's desk, which had been burning at a polite and unremarkable height, stretched upward by 2 inches. Neither of them commented on this. The 22, Harry said. They're all mine. All of them. All of them. By birthright, by compact, by conquest inheritance, by reclamation, and in 2 cases by what we call sovereign selection, the title chose you, not through blood, but through the assessment of the ancient magic itself. Ragnarok gathered the scroll back. Most of the houses are dormant. Several have no living members other than you. 3 have proxy members currently sitting Wizengamot seats under assumption of caretaker authority, which is no longer legally valid. Your claim supersedes them. Who are they? Lord Cassius Avery holds proxy seats for houses Selwyn, Pruitt, and Bones on caretaker terms. He has held them for 19 years. Ragnarok's voice remained entirely neutral. Under Goblin banking law and the Noble House Charter of 1612, proxy caretaker authority is immediately voided upon emergence of a direct heir. He will be notified within 3 days, as required by law. Harry thought about this. He thought about the name Pruitt, Molly Weasley's family name before she married. He thought about Bones, Susan Bones, who sat in his Hufflepuff classes and said sensible things in defense against the dark arts, whose family name was Bones. He thought about Avery, which was a Death Eater name, a name from the list he'd heard murmured in dark connections for 4 years. "He's not going to like that," Harry said. "No," Ragnar agreed. "He will not." "Good." Harry leaned back and looked at the ceiling, which was plain stone and not going to help him with any of this. "Ragnar. What is the Cursed King title?" "The Sovereign Resonance. What actually is it?" Ragnar was quiet for a moment. Then he stood again and went to the shelf and removed something that wasn't a ledger. It was smaller, older, bound in what might have been leather and might have been something else, its cover inlaid with silver knotwork that Harry recognized as the same style as the carvings he'd seen in history of magic textbooks depicting pre-Roman Britain. "This is a translation of the Compact of the Sovereign Land," Ragnar said, setting it on the desk between them. He didn't open it. "The original is in Old British, and its protections prevent direct copying, so what you see here is Gringotts' working translation, compiled over 4 centuries. He touched the cover lightly. "Before the Roman invasion. Before Merlin, before Hogwarts, before the Statute of Secrecy, there was a tradition among the magical peoples of these islands of binding the land to a sovereign. Not a political sovereign. A magical one. A human being who served as, the word in Old British translates roughly as anchor or voice or conduit, depending on context. The land itself chose this person. The land and the sovereign were in compact with one another, the sovereign drew power from the land drew awareness and will from the sovereign." Harry looked at the book. "What does it mean when it's cursed?" "The curse came later. After the last true sovereign was killed, approximately 550 CE, some scholars suggest it was connected to the Battle of Camlan, though we don't speculate. The land did not die, it did not choose a new sovereign, it simply waited. Accumulated. And the compact was altered by the waiting, by the grief of the land for its sovereign, and by certain interventions, some deliberate, some not, so that when the title eventually passes again, it carries everything the land has been holding. Power, memory, grief, will." He paused. "And a degree of the land's displeasure at having been kept waiting so long. So it's cursed because the land is angry," Harry said. "Essentially." "How angry?" Ragnar looked at him steadily. 3 hours ago, Mr. Potter, while you were unconscious in this room, there were 3 earth tremors detected in southern England. The Ministry believes they are unconnected. We do not." Harry stared at him. "The land knows you're here," Ragnar said simply. They talked for another 2 hours. Or rather, Ragnar talked and Harry listened and occasionally asked precise questions that seemed, from the slight shifts in Ragnar's expression, to be exactly the right questions. He learned that his family vault, the real one, the main one, not the trust vault he'd been drawing on for school expenses, was the largest single wizarding vault in Britain. Had been for 300 years. He learned that the Potter property holdings included, beyond Godric's Hollow, 4 other estates in Britain and 1 in France, all currently under Gringotts' caretaker management because no heir had ever come to claim them. He learned that his father's family had been Wisengamot members of standing for 2 centuries, and that those seats had been voted in his absence by proxy, and that the proxy holders, a rotating group managed by Dumbledore's suggestion, he learned, over the past 4 years, had consistently voted against measures that would have benefited the Potter estate and consistently in favor of measures that kept the estate's political power dormant. He learned that Dumbledore had, on 3 separate occasions, formally requested that Gringotts delay sending the mandatory inheritance disclosure that had finally reached Harry this morning. Gringotts had delayed twice, under pressure of wizarding law ambiguity. They had refused the 3rd time, because by that point Harry was within the window where refusal would have constituted a violation of their own banking charter. "Why did you delay the first 2 times?" Harry asked. Not accusatorially. Just wanting to know. Ragnar was quiet for a moment. "Because Dumbledore is formidable, because the political climate was unfavorable, and because," he paused, and this pause was different from his usual considered silences, "we were not certain what would happen when you learned. The sovereign title carries history that makes it uncomfortable, politically. We were cautious. And now? Now you are here. The suppression has broken. The title has activated. Caution is no longer a useful strategy. Ragnarok looked at him across the desk. Mr. Potter. I will be direct with you, because I think you can handle it and because I have found, in my experience, that directness is less painful than its alternatives in the long run. Gringotts has interests in this situation. We have always had interests. The noble house system, the goblin banking charter, the wizarding compact of 1689, these things affect us, and a consolidated claim of 22 houses of the magnitude you carry changes the political mathematics of wizarding Britain in ways that are advantageous to us. You want the Goblin Reparations Act, Harry said. Ragnarok stilled. How do you know about that? Hermione, Harry said. She reads. She mentioned it last year. There's been a bill sitting in the Wisengamot for 40 years, full legal recognition of goblin property rights and the return of certain claimed artifacts. It keeps getting voted down. He looked at Ragnarok steadily. You want me to understand that you have your own reasons for helping me. That this isn't charity. Yes, Ragnarok said. All right, Harry said. I appreciate that. It's more honest than most of the help I've been given. Something shifted in Ragnarok's face. Very subtle. The closest thing to warmth that Harry had yet seen from him. There is one more thing, Ragnarok said, and he picked up a small wooden box from the corner of his desk. Harry hadn't noticed it before, it had been sitting there the whole time and he simply hadn't registered it, which was strange, because now that he noticed it the box seemed to pull the eye like a gravity source. When we removed the suppression charms from your person, this emerged. From your magical core. It was not physically present before the suppression broke. It is now. He opened the box. Inside, on a pad of dark velvet, was a ring. It was old in the way the book about the compact was old, visually carrying the weight of centuries. Plain band of dark silver with gold inlay, knotwork along the outside edge, and set into the top a stone that was neither black nor green nor any fixed color but moved between them the way deep water moves between dark and light. On the inner face of the band, Harry could make out lettering in the same old British style as the compact. The Sovereign's Ring, Ragnarok said. It was last worn in the 6th century. We have had it in our keeping ever since, as specified by the compact. It recognizes its sovereign. When the suppression broke, it reacted. He glanced at the box. It was on the second subterranean level of our vault system when the suppression broke. It was found here, in this room, approximately 5 minutes after your collapse. Harry looked at the ring for a long moment. It moved through the vault system on its own, he said. Yes. To get to me. Yes. He reached into the box and picked it up. It was warm, not room temperature warm, but warm like a hand, warm like something alive. He turned it over and read the old British on the inner face, which he should not have been able to read and which he read without difficulty, each word coming clear as if he'd always known it. I am the voice. I am the memory. I am the anger of the land. I am the king who waits in every stone. He put it on his right hand, index finger, which was where it fit. He felt the warmth travel up his arm and spread into his chest, and for a moment the fire in the fireplace burned white. Right, Harry said. Ragnarok looked at him carefully. Are you all right? Harry considered the question properly. He checked the inside of himself the way you check a map, looking for landmarks, orienting by what he found. He felt bigger, somehow. Not physically. Just, bigger. Like a room whose walls had been pushed out, more space inside than you'd previously been aware of. And underneath that space, something that moved like deep water, vast and dark and unimaginably old, that was also, unmistakably, his. Yeah, he said. I think I am. He looked at Ragnarok. I need to understand everything. The 22 houses, all of them. The Sovereign Compact. What it means practically, politically, legally. All of it. That will take time. I've got time. It will also require decisions, Ragnar said. Some of them difficult. Some of them irreversible. I know. Harry looked down at the ring on his hand. The stone shifted colors, dark to green to a depth below both. You said you've been waiting to have this conversation for 3 years. Why 3 years? Because 3 years ago, we first detected the sovereign resonance building against the suppression. Ragnar folded his hands on the desk. We have been preparing. The reading is compiled. The legal documentation for all 22 houses is ready to be transferred. We can have the initial Gringotts filings ready by morning. He paused. What we have not been able to prepare is your response. That, Mr. Potter, depends entirely on you. Harry stood up from the couch. He was still a little shaky, the aftermath of the collapse, the aftershock of so many revelations, but when he stood straight, and when he looked at Ragnar across the desk his eyes were clear. Schedule the full reading for tomorrow, he said. I want Hermione Granger here. She's the person I trust most to tell me when I'm being an idiot. He paused. Also send a message to Neville Longbottom. Tell him it's important. Don't tell anyone else. Not yet. Ragnar inclined his head. And Dumbledore? Not yet, Harry said. He will know something has happened. The suppression breaking would have, I know. But I want to understand what I'm dealing with before I have that conversation. Harry looked at the ring again. He put those suppressions on me. He has reasons. I don't doubt that. But I want to understand my own situation first, completely and clearly, before I sit down with someone who has spent 4 years making sure I don't understand my own situation. Ragnar was quiet for a moment. Then he said something Harry hadn't expected, at least not in English. He said it first in gobbledygook, and then he repeated it in English, and his voice when he said it had the quality of something formal, something that carried weight, well-spoken, sovereign. Harry looked at him. Don't call me that. What shall I call you? Harry. A pause. Then, Drilly, that will take some getting used to. Yeah, well. Harry glanced at the door. I should write to Hermione. Do you have parchment? We have Gringotts parchment. The owls we use are, Ragnar hesitated slightly, considerably more reliable than standard post. Perfect. Harry sat down at the small table beside the couch, accepted the parchment and quill that one of the door goblins provided, and wrote a short note to Hermione. He sat with it for a moment and then wrote a second to Neville. Both notes said roughly the same thing, come to Gringotts tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock. Don't tell anyone. I'll explain everything. He signed them both with his name and didn't add anything else, because Hermione would be here at 8:45 and Neville would be here at 9 on the dot and neither of them would need more explanation than those 2 sentences. He folded the notes, passed them to the goblin at the door, and then sat back and looked at his right hand in the warm firelight. The ring caught it and threw it back in colors it hadn't started with, gold and green and something darker, something that predated both. He could feel, if he focused, a faint hum in the metal. Not mechanical. More like resonance, like the hum of a struck bell that goes on beyond what should be physically possible. I am the voice. I am the memory. I am the anger of the land. Somewhere in southern England, the ground was settling after 3 unexplained tremors. Harry Potter sat in a warm room deep inside Gringotts Bank and felt, for the first time since he'd been old enough to have feelings about his own life, that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Not because someone had placed him there. Not because prophecy or fate or Dumbledore's careful hand had guided him to this chair. Because he had walked in here himself, on his own feet, on his 15th birthday, with a letter in his pocket and toast in his stomach, and everything that came after had been his. He looked up at Ragnar. Tomorrow, he said. We start at 9. Ragnar inclined his head. I will have everything ready. Outside, over London, the summer sky had gone the deep gold of late afternoon, and somewhere far below the city, in the ancient stone through which Gringotts had been built, something old and patient and immeasurably powerful turned over in its long sleep like a dreamer who has just, after many years, heard the sound they have been waiting for. Chapter 2, 22 Hermione arrived at 8:43. Harry knew this because he was already in the front lobby of Gringotts, sitting on a carved stone bench that had probably never been intended for sitting on, watching the bronze doors, and she came through them with her hair escaping its braid and her eyes doing that particular thing they did when she was trying to contain approximately 7 emotions at once and wasn't entirely succeeding. She saw him. She crossed the marble floor in 12 steps. "You look terrible," she said. "Good morning to you too, Harry." She sat down beside him and grabbed his arm and looked at his face the way she sometimes looked at a page she was trying to memorize. "What happened?" "Your note said don't tell anyone but it's Gringotts, so I told my mum I was going to Diagon Alley for school supplies, which isn't technically a lie, and I came by Flo to the leaky cauldron and Tom looked at me the way he looks at people and I walked very fast past him. Are you hurt?" "You said you'd explain everything." "I will explain everything. You said that in the note. I've been explaining everything to myself all night and none of my explanations are good." "Yeah, yours are probably worse than the truth." He paused. "Actually, no. The truth might be worse than yours. It depends what you came up with." She stared at him. Then her eyes dropped to his right hand and the ring, and for a moment she was very still in the way she was when something she was looking at didn't match any category she already had. "Harry," she said carefully. "What is that?" "That's part of the explanation. It's warm. I can." She reached out and then stopped herself. "I can feel it from here." "What is it?" "It's called the Sovereign's Ring. It's approximately 1500 years old. And before you ask, yes, it found me, not the other way around. I'll tell you the rest inside." Hermione opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. 1500, the doors opened and Neville came through them looking pink-cheeked from hurrying, his robe slightly crooked, Gran's influence visible in the dragon-hide gloves he was still pulling off. He spotted Harry and Hermione and crossed to them with the particular relieved expression of someone who'd spent the journey here imagining various catastrophes and was glad to find only one of them sitting on a bench. "Right," he said, slightly breathless. "I'm here. Gran thinks I'm at Ollivander's getting my wand regripped." "What's happening?" Harry looked at both of them. "I'll tell you inside. There's a lot." "How much is a lot?" Neville asked. 22 houses worth, Harry said, and stood up, and walked toward the front desk, and left them exchanging a look behind him that he could feel without seeing it, Hermione's expression sharpening into focus, Neville's going very still, and he was at the front desk by the time they caught up. Ragnarok received them in the same room as the previous evening, which had been subtly reorganized overnight. The fire was going. The desk was clear of everything except the master scroll and a stack of documents the size of a decent novel, and there were 3 chairs arranged in front of the desk with the particular deliberateness of someone who had thought carefully about seating and power dynamics. There was also, Harry noticed, a small spread of breakfast things on the side table, proper food, not just tea. He was obscurely touched by this and didn't say anything about it. Ragnarok entered from a side door a minute after they were seated, accompanied by a younger goblin Harry hadn't seen before who carried 2 more ledgers and whose job, it became clear, was to produce specific documents at specific moments with the precision of someone who'd rehearsed it. "Mr. Potter," Ragnarok said, taking his seat. His eyes moved to Hermione and Neville with the sharp assessment of someone filing information. "These are the individuals you trust. Hermione Granger and Neville Longbottom," Harry said. "Whatever you say to me, you can say in front of them." Ragnarok looked at Neville for a fraction longer than he'd looked at Hermione. "Longbottom," he said. "Your family holds the ancient and noble house of Longbottom, currently in partial dormancy due to your grandmother's caretaker status. You should be aware that one of the 22 houses Mr. Potter is claiming today has an historical compact with the Longbottom line that will require your family's acknowledgement. Neville blinked. Which one? House Bones. Ragnock turned back to Harry. I will explain the connection during the reading. For now, shall we begin? Hermione already had a notepad and quill out, which Harry had expected. Neville was sitting forward with his elbows on his knees, watching Ragnock with an expression Harry recognized. It was the expression Neville got in herbology when something was more interesting than he'd been led to believe, a particular quality of attention that was easy to miss because it was quiet. Ragnock picked up the Master Scroll. I will read each house in order of precedence, he said. For each, I will state the name, the nature of the claim, the current status, and any outstanding complications. I will pause for questions. I ask that you hold larger questions until the end, some things will answer themselves as we proceed. He looked at Harry. Ready? Ready. House Potter, Ragnock began. Ancient and noble. Claimed by birthright, father's line. Current status, active, primary. Complications, 6 years of proxy voting by Dumbledore-managed appointees, now void. Wisengamot seat, 1. Financial holdings, see Ledger 3, Column A, Properties, 5 estates, full inventory available. Magic artifact inventory held in main vault, unseen by current heir. He paused. You have never visited the main vault, Mr. Potter. I've only ever been to the Trust Vault. The Trust Vault represents approximately 3% of the Potter estate. He said this without emphasis, which somehow made it worse. He moved on. House Peverell. Ancient and most noble. Claimed by maternal line reclamation. Current status, active, primary. No Wisengamot seat has been claimed in 3 centuries, the seat exists in dormancy and will require a formal reinstatement motion, which we will file tomorrow. He looked briefly at Hermione. House Peverell's claim is the root of 3 subsidiary claims, Gaunt, Slytherin, and Emery's. I will address each separately. Hermione's quill was moving very fast. She underlined something twice. House Gaunt, Ragnock continued. Ancient and noble. Claimed by conquest inheritance through Peverell. The Gaunt line is extinct by biological succession. Its last male heir died in 1943. Its last living member died in 1994. He paused. The Gaunt line had, prior to extinction, entered into a dark blood compact that placed certain assets in trust against a contested heir. Those assets, including Gaunt's ring and associated objects, have been held by Gringotts pending resolution of the contested inheritance. They are now yours. Harry kept his face neutral. Gaunt's ring. The resurrection stone. He filed this information in the part of his mind he was keeping for later. House Slytherin. Ancient and most noble. Claimed through Peverell Compact, activated upon extinction of the direct Slytherin line in 1792. Current status, contested. Ragnock set down a separate document. There is a living individual who claims the Slytherin title through the Gaunt connection, the same individual who was the last living Gaunt. As he is deceased, his contestation is void, and the claim resolves by default to the next in line, which is you, through the Peverell Compact. He looked at Harry directly. You hold the Slytherin title, Mr. Potter. You are, by blood compact, heir of Slytherin. The Wisengamot seat associated with the title is one of the oldest and most influential in the chamber. The room was quiet. Neville was staring. Hermione had stopped writing. Harry said, Voldemort was the last Gaunt. Yes. And now his claim on Slytherin passes to me. It does not pass, Ragnock said. It resolves. The compact was always clear, Peverell takes precedence over the Gaunt collateral line. Voldemort's claim was, from a strict legal standpoint, illegitimate the moment you were born. He simply was not aware of your maternal heritage. A pause. Few people were. Harry sat with this for a moment. Then he nodded for Ragnar to continue. House Emrys, Ragnar said, and his voice shifted slightly, not much, but Harry caught it, a quality of care. This is not an ancient and noble house in the Wisengamot sense. It is a sovereign house, the only one in the registry. It carries no seat in the Wisengamot because the Wisengamot was not created until centuries after the Emrys Compact was written, and the Compact does not recognize the Wisengamot as a superior authority. What it carries instead is described in the Compact of the Sovereign Land. He glanced at the small book on the desk's edge. In practical terms, House Emrys and the Cursed King title are the same claim. They are listed separately for administrative purposes only. You said yesterday it was a sovereign compact, Harry said. What does that mean in actual terms? What can I actually do with it? Ragnar looked at him steadily. We will address that when we come to the compact in full. There is a reason I am reading the houses first. Harry accepted this and gestured for him to continue. They went through the rest. House Gryffindor, which made Hermione make a small involuntary sound and then press her lips together, claimed through a compact with the House of Potter going back to the Founders' era, Godric Gryffindor having signed a mutual succession agreement with the then head of House Potter in 1004 CE. The Gryffindor line had been extinct since 1671 and the compact had been dormant, accumulating, ever since. House Ravenclaw, by the same mechanism, a different founder, a different compact, this one with the Peveril line directly. Rowena Ravenclaw, it turned out, had trusted Ignotus Peveril above all others, and the compact she'd written was meticulous, comprehensive, and had been waiting 800 years for the right combination of bloodlines to activate it. Hermione made a different sound at this one. A quieter sound. Harry glanced at her and she was looking at the desk and her eyes were bright. She left her title to someone who'd care about learning, she said quietly. Not to Ragnar. More to herself. That is one interpretation, Ragnar said, without unkindness. They went through Hufflepuff, no founding compact, this one through a land grant and subsequent magical adoption that had been legally complex enough that Ragnar spent 4 minutes on it alone, and then through 8 houses that Harry had either never heard of or knew only as names on Wisengamot listings he'd occasionally seen in the Prophet. Rosier. Selwyn. McNabb. Montague. Folly. Flint. Greengrass, which made Neville twitch slightly for a reason Harry filed away. Ollivander. Ollivander? Harry said. Not the wandmaker specifically. The House Ollivander. A different branch of the same family, extinct in the male line, whose magical compact transferred to you through the Emrys sovereign selection. House Pruitt, and Harry watched Neville's expression change when Ragnar explained that House Pruitt had been a Longbottom allied house for 2 centuries, which was the compact Ragnar had mentioned in the lobby. The Pruitt line was not fully extinct, Molly Weasley was a Pruitt by birth, but the house title and its Wisengamot seat had been declared dormant in 1981 after Fabian and Gideon Pruitt were killed, and no one had filed to reinstate it, which had left the seat available for Avery's proxy claim. House Bones, for similar reasons, the male Bones line was gone, Susan Bones' family the last remnant of a once extensive family, and again the dormancy declaration had left the seat dangling. Both the Pruitt and Bones dormancy declarations are legally questionable, Ragnar said. Living family members could have contested them. They were not given the opportunity to do so because the ministry processed both dormancy declarations with unusual speed. Unusual speed, Harry said. Filed and approved in the same week in both cases. The official who approved them retired the following year on a comfortable pension. Right. Harry looked at Neville. Susan Bones is at Hogwarts. Yeah, Neville said. He'd been quiet through most of the reading, processing in his own way, which Harry respected. Now he met Harry's eyes. And Mrs. Weasley is a Pruitt. She should know about this. She will, Harry said. But not yet. Not until I understand what I'm working with. Ragnar completed the list with houses Beaumont and Cavendish, both so anciently dormant that their last conscious claims dated to the 1500s, and the 22nd, which was the one Harry had been waiting for without knowing he was waiting for it, because Ragnarok saved it for last in the way that a person telling a story saves the detail that changes everything. House Pendragon. The room went very quiet. Pendragon, Harry said. Yes. As in Arthur. As in the royal line of Britannia, pre-Norman conquest, the magical sovereign lineage that predates every other claim in this room. Ragnarok folded his hands. The Pendragon line did not die at Camlin. It went into the land. The blood dispersed through the centuries, diluted, dormant, carried through generation after generation of ordinary magical families without activating because the sovereign compact had been suppressed and the resonance had no anchor. When your mother carried the Peveril Reclamation and your father carried the Pottergryffindor Pendragon confluence, he paused, the combination was sufficient to activate the dormant sovereign resonance. You were born carrying a claim that had been waiting, by our calculation, for approximately 1400 years. Harry looked down at the ring. The stone moved through its dark colors with slow deliberation, as if it was listening. That's why the suppression was put on me, he said. Not a question. We believe so, yes. Because if someone knew what I was, if someone knew what you carried, yes, the political and magical implications would be significant. Ragnarok's voice was careful. We do not speculate about motive. Harry looked up. I will. That is your prerogative. Hermione set down her quill. Harry glanced at her and found her looking at him with an expression that he recognized. She'd worn it in first year when they'd been looking at the chessboard in the trap room, that particular expression of someone whose mind is moving very fast and who is holding it steady by main force. The suppression's on Harry, she said to Ragnarok. The two that Dumbledore cast, was there anyone else? Was there a third caster for the blood suppression? The blood suppression caster's signature was obfuscated, Ragnarok said. We cannot confirm identity. But you have a guess, she said. We have a hypothesis that we are not in a position to state formally. Could it have been cast by Voldemort? On the night he killed Harry's parents? A pause. It could have been. The timing is consistent. The nature of the suppression, blood level, not core level, is consistent with magic cast in extremity rather than in preparation. Ragnarok paused. It is also possible that in the act of casting the killing curse on an infant who carried the sovereign resonance, the interaction itself produced a suppressive effect that was not deliberate. So Voldemort might have accidentally suppressed his own heir, Harry said. You are not his heir, Ragnarok said, and his voice was sharp and immediate for the first time in the conversation. The Slytherin title resolves to you because the Peveril Compact predates and supersedes Gaunt. You did not inherit from Voldemort. You took back what was always yours. Harry heard the distinction. All right. Yeah. That matters. He looked at his hands. All right. Neville had been silent for several minutes, which for Neville meant he was either overwhelmed or working through something substantial. Harry looked at him. You okay? I'm fine, Neville said, and then, a beat later, the Pruitt Compact with Longbottom. What does it actually mean? What am I acknowledging? Ragnarok looked at him with what was, for Ragnarok, a warm expression. It means that when House Pruitt's Wisingamot seat is reinstated under Mr. Potter's claim, House Longbottom becomes a formally allied house. An allied house carries secondary voting rights on matters that affect the primary house's interests, and vice versa. It also means that certain protections that were dormant with the house become active. He paused. Your grandmother will understand this immediately. The Longbottom family was very close to the Pruitts before the war. Neville's jaw worked. My mum and dad were friends with Gideon and Fabian Pruitt. Mum used to talk about them before, he stopped. Before she couldn't anymore. The room held that for a moment. She was trying to tell you something, Harry said quietly. Neville looked at him. Yeah. His voice was rough. Maybe. Harry let it rest. He turned back to Ragnarok. The compact. The sovereign compact, tell me what it means in real terms. Not the history. What can I actually do? Ragnarok picked up the ancient book. He didn't open it. He held it in both hands the way he had the day before, and when he spoke there was a formality in his voice that had been absent for much of the morning. The compact of the sovereign land grants the cursed king certain rights and abilities that exist outside the framework of ministry law, Wisengamot authority, or any other magical governance structure currently operating in Britain, he said. This is not a metaphor or an aspiration. It is a legal and magical fact. The compact predates all other legal structures and was never dissolved, superseded, or transferred. It is the oldest operating magical compact in existence. He opened the book to a marked page. In practical terms. First, sovereign claim of land. The cursed king has the right to claim any property in Britain that has been illegally seized, magically bound, or held against its rightful owner through the use of dark or coercive magic. The claim is irresistible, it cannot be legally contested. Second, sovereign voice in council. Any deliberative body operating under British magical authority, the Wisengamot, the Ministry, the Hogwarts Board of Governors, must, by compact, permit the sovereign to address them without prior notice and without interruption. Third, wait, Harry said. Without prior notice? Correct. You can walk into the Wisengamot chamber and speak and they must hear you. Hermione made a sound that was almost a laugh, caught it, and converted it to a cough. Third, Ragnarok continued, allowing this, sovereign right of challenge. Any law, decree, or ministry order that conflicts with the rights of the British magical population may be challenged by the cursed king directly, without requiring a Wisengamot sponsor or petition. The challenge creates a mandatory review period during which the law cannot be enforced. He looked up. This right has never been exercised. Because there has not been a cursed king to exercise it. For 1400 years, Harry said. Yes. He let himself think about this. He let himself think about Umbridge, who was coming to Hogwarts as Fudge's proxy. He let himself think about the educational decrees, which Hermione had been tracking with increasing alarm since they'd been announced. He let himself think about the Daily Prophet's character assassination campaign against him and Dumbledore, and the Ministry's determination to keep the truth about Voldemort's return buried. Sovereign right of challenge. Fourth, Ragnarok said, watching Harry's face with evident interest. Sovereign protection of the land. This is the compact's most significant and least predictable provision. The cursed king can draw on the magical resonance of the land itself, not as a spell, not as a constructed magical working, but as a direct extension of the sovereign's will. The land hears the king. The land responds. The limits of this are, he paused, not fully understood. The last sovereign did not reign long enough for the limits to be tested. What was the last sovereign's name? Neville asked. Ragnarok looked at him. The texts refer to him only as the once and future king, which is a title rather than a name. However, and here Ragnarok allowed himself something that might have been a very small smile, our records suggest his given name was Arthur. Silence. Then Hermione said, the legend is real. Most legends contain a factual core, Ragnarok said. The factual core of this one is sitting to your left. Harry looked at both of them. Neville was staring at the ring with an expression of pure and uncomplicated wonder. Hermione was looking at Harry with the expression she reserved for problems she loved, the rare kind that were also terrifying. Right, Harry said. The curse. Yesterday you said it's cursed because the land is angry. What does that mean for me, practically? What does the curse actually do? It is less a curse in the hexing sense and more a condition, Ragnarok said carefully. The land has been waiting for a sovereign for 14 centuries. It has accumulated power, memory, and a certain amount of impatience. When the compact activates in a new sovereign, all of that accumulated weight transfers. You will be more powerful than any witch or wizard currently living. You will have access to magical knowledge and instinct that you haven't studied. And you will, at intervals and without complete control, channel the land's emotional state. He paused. The 3 tremors yesterday were the mildest possible expression of this. As you come into your power, it gets louder, Harry said. Yes. Until you learn to manage it. The previous sovereigns, from historical record, took approximately 2 years to reach full stability. What happens to the land while I'm learning? Unusual weather. Localized magical surges. Animals behaving strangely near your location. Nothing catastrophic, if you are reasonably careful. Reasonably careful, Hermione murmured, writing something down with the particular penmanship of someone who is trying very hard not to editorialize. There's something else, Harry said. He'd been sitting with a feeling since yesterday, since the moment he put on the ring, and he hadn't said it yet because he hadn't been sure it was real. But it had been getting more insistent through the morning, like a sound that you gradually realize you've been hearing for a while. Since yesterday. I can feel them. Ragnarok was very still. Them. The houses. The estates. Harry pressed his hand flat against his knee and tried to explain what was difficult to explain. It's like, you know when you walk into a room and you know someone has just left it. Something's still warm. It's like that. I can feel the estates. Vaguely. Like presences. And something else, something much bigger and much older. Like something below everything else. He looked at Ragnarok. Is that the land? Yes, Ragnarok said. The word had weight in it. It's aware of me. Yes. And I'm aware of it. Harry looked at his hand. Is that normal for sovereign? It is the compact, Ragnarok said simply. You are bonded to the land, Mr. Potter. You have been since birth. The suppression hid it. Without the suppression, he opened his hands, a gesture Harry had not yet seen from him, open and expansive where everything else had been precise. You will grow more sensitive to it over time, not less. Hermione put her quill down. Harry. Her voice was careful. What do you want to do? He looked at her. I mean it, she said. Not what should you do, not what would be strategically optimal. You've just been told you're heir to 22 houses, you carry the most significant magical title in British history, and someone, Dumbledore, has been suppressing it your whole life. What do you want? The question landed clean and clear in the middle of everything else, the way her question sometimes did, cutting through the noise by being exactly direct. Harry thought about it honestly. I want answers from Dumbledore, he said. Not yet, but I want them eventually. I want to understand what he thought he was doing. He paused. I want those proxy seats dealt with, Pruitt and Bones especially. Avery shouldn't have them. Agreed, said Neville quietly. I want to know what's in the main Potter vault. I've been going to school for 4 years with a fraction of what's mine and no one thought to mention it. He heard a slight edge in his own voice and didn't try to smooth it. I want the Wisengamot seats activated, all of them that can be, because there's something coming at Hogwarts in September and I'd rather face it with every legal tool available than without. He paused. And I want the sovereign right of challenge ready to use, because Fudge is sending someone to Hogwarts as a ministry spy and I am not going to let that stand. Hermione's chin came up slightly, that small signal of absolute alignment. Umbridge, she said. Umbridge, he agreed. Ragnarok was watching him with an expression that was, Harry thought, satisfaction, the quiet, internal kind. We can begin the formal transfer process today. Signing the House Lord documentation for each of the 22 houses will take approximately 3 hours. You will need to select a ring or token for each house, most have ancestral rings in our vault, or grant Gringotts proxy authority to manage in your name. I'll sign each one personally, Harry said. That is, unusual. Most lords manage 10 or more houses by proxy. I'll sign them. Ragnarok regarded him. It will take the full 3 hours. I've got the time. Very well. He signaled to the young goblin, who produced the first document from the stack with the precision of long practice. We begin with House Potter, as the primary house. Please review the document in full before signing. Gringotts policy, Ragnarok. The goblin looked up. I trust Gringotts more than I trust most people right now, Harry said. But I'm going to read everything I sign. All 3 hours worth. So we should start. Something moved through Ragnarok's eyes, something old and sharp and not unlike respect. He placed the document in front of Harry without another word. Harry picked up the quill. He read the first page carefully, all of it, the formal language flowing over and through him with the new clarity that the ring seemed to be lending him, the legal terms resolving naturally, and he turned the page and read the second, and the room was quiet except for the fire and the scratch of Hermione's own quill as she made notes on a fresh piece of parchment, keeping her own record. It took 3 hours and 12 minutes. By the end of it Harry's hand ached slightly and there were 22 signed documents in a neat stack on Ragnarok's desk and the fire had been burning steadily all morning but the room felt warmer than it had been, some quality of the air changed, the way rooms change when a door is opened that has been closed for a long time. Neville had helped. In the middle of House Pruitt's documentation, when Harry reached the section requiring an allied house acknowledgement, Ragnarok had produced a separate document and placed it in front of Neville with quiet formality and Neville had read it, slowly, the way Neville did things when they mattered, with full attention, and signed his name in the clear, deliberate hand that his grandmother had drilled into him since childhood. Neville Longbottom, Lord Longbottom in waiting. The old allies, reconnected. When it was done, Ragnarok set the final document aside and looked at Harry across his desk. As of today, he said, you are formally lord of all 22 houses. The Wisengamot filings will be submitted at 9 tomorrow morning. By Wisengamot rules, a filing of this scope triggers a mandatory emergency session within 7 days. He paused. The session will be eventful. I'm counting on it, Harry said. There is one more thing for today. Ragnarok stood and moved to the large locked cabinet behind his desk. He opened it with a touch and a word in gobbledygook and withdrew a key, old gold, heavy, runes etched along the shaft. He set it on the desk between them. The main Potter vault. We thought you might want to see it today. Harry looked at the key. What's in there? Books, Ragnarok said. The entire collected library of House Potter, which absorbed the Gryffindor Library intact in 1671 and portions of the Peveril Library through magical reclamation. Also artifacts, correspondence, a full genealogical archive, and, he paused with what might have been deliberate timing, your parents' personal belongings, which were removed from Godric's Hollow by Gringotts agents in 1981 for safekeeping, as stipulated in the Potter account agreement. Harry went very still. My parents' things, he said. Yes. Hermione reached over and touched his arm, not saying anything. Neville looked at the fire. Yeah, Harry said, after a moment. Yeah, let's go. They went down in the cart, the real cart system, the one that went deep, the one that felt like falling and tasted like cold stone, and the vault was at a level Harry had never been to before, far below the trust vault, far below even the main bank's lower chambers, in a place where the rock around them was old beyond calculation and the torch brackets on the walls held green-gold flames that burned without fuel or air. The vault door was not the familiar round portal of the upper levels. It was a set of double doors, 10 feet high, dark bronze, engraved floor to ceiling with the Potter family tree, not just the recent generations but the deep tree, centuries of it, branching and rebranching, and at the very top where the trunk should have been there was not a name but the symbol Harry had seen in first year, carved into the flap of his school trunk, a shape he'd always thought was a stylized P but which he now recognized, with the clarity that the ring kept lending him, as something much older. A crown. Narrow and ancient and not quite human in its proportions. The crown of the sovereign. It had been there his whole life. In the lid of his school trunk. He stood looking at it for a moment. All right? Hermione said, beside him. "It's been there the whole time," he said. "I just didn't know what I was looking at." He touched the doors with his ringed hand and they opened. The vault was enormous. It was lit by the same green-gold flames and it smelled of old books and cedar and something clean and sharp that Harry associated, without logic, with the moors, open land, wide sky, stone breaking the surface of the earth. The shelves went up and curved away and vanished into the upper dark and they were full, absolutely full, thousands of volumes, their spines in gold and brown and deep green. In the center of the room, on a stone plinth, there were 3 boxes. Each one was labeled in handwriting Harry recognized from the only samples he'd ever had, the writing on the back of the photographs he kept in his dormitory. His mother's handwriting on one. His father's on another. On the third, both together, the same label in 2 hands, for Harry. He crossed the vault and stood in front of them and put both hands flat on the lid of the 3rd box and felt, through the wood and the magic that preserved it, something warm and still and specific. Not the vast warmth of the land, not the enormous resonance of 22 houses, but something particular and quiet and human. He didn't open it yet. He just stood there. Behind him, he heard Hermione and Neville move quietly to the bookshelves, giving him space, doing it naturally, the way people who are actually your friends do things without making a production of it. He stood there for a little while longer. Then he straightened, turned around, and looked at the vault, really looked at it, the full scope of it, the library and the artifact cases and the correspondence archive and everything his family had built and kept and passed forward across centuries, all of it waiting here, patient in the deep stone, for someone to come and open the door. He had 4 days before the Wisengamot filing would trigger its emergency session. He knew now what he was. He knew the shape and weight of his inheritance. He knew who had hidden it and roughly why. And he knew the conversation with Dumbledore was coming and he knew it was going to be hard, and he knew Avery was going to be a problem and he knew Voldemort was still out there and he knew the year ahead was going to be the most difficult of his already difficult life. He also knew something that he hadn't known yesterday morning when he'd been sitting on the 7:14 to London feeling like something was about to break. He was not alone in his own skin anymore. He never had been. There was a whole world inside him, old and deep and sometimes frightening and entirely, indisputably his, and it had been waiting for him with the particular patience of something that has always known it will be found. He looked at Hermione, who was reading a spine on the 3rd shelf with the expression of someone trying not to reach for it immediately. He looked at Neville, who had found the genealogical section and was standing in front of it with his mouth slightly open. "Right," Harry said. "Take whatever you want to read. We've got the vault all day." He turned back to the box labeled for Harry, in his parents' 2 hands, and he opened it. Chapter 3, The King's First Move. The Wisengamot session was called for Thursday. Ragnar's filing had gone in at 9 on Wednesday morning, as promised, and by 11 the mandatory emergency notice had been issued by the Wisengamot clerk's office, a pale, perpetually anxious man named Weatherby who had, according to Ragnar's source inside the ministry, read the filing 3 times, gone to get his supervisor, and then both of them had gone to get their supervisor, and by noon the entire Wisengamot administrative office was in a state that Ragnar described, with characteristic understatement, as elevated. Harry spent Wednesday in the vault. He read his parents' letters. Not all of them, there were hundreds, decades of correspondence, his parents' entire adult lives laid out in ink and parchment, but he read the ones in the For Harry box, which were the ones they'd written knowing they might not survive to give him in person. His mother's handwriting was small and precise and she had a habit of underlining words she found particularly important, and his father's was loose and quick and occasionally he'd drawn small sketches in the margins when words weren't quite working. There were 12 letters in total. He read them all twice and then he sat on the stone floor of the vault and let the green-gold firelight move over everything and didn't say anything for a while, and neither did Hermione or Neville, who had very quietly arranged themselves nearby with books in their hands that they may or may not have actually been reading. Then he stood up, dusted off his jeans, and said, "Right. We need to find me robes." Hermione looked up. "For Thursday. I'm not walking into the Wisengamot in school clothes. There's a full wardrobe inventory in the artifact section," Neville said, without looking up from the genealogy volume he'd been reading for 3 hours. Third shelf from the right, there's a catalogue. Potter family formal robes going back about 200 years. Your dad should be roughly your size. Harry and Hermione both looked at him. What? Neville said. I've been reading. Thursday arrived with the particular weight of a day that knows it matters. Harry had slept in a Gringotts guest room. He'd owed the Dursleys a brief note saying he was visiting friends, which was true enough to satisfy the wards and sufficiently vague to avoid questions, and Ragnarok had arranged the room with the same quiet competence he arranged everything. Hermione had gone home to reassure her parents she was alive and would explain later, which was, as Harry observed, going to be a fascinating conversation. Neville had gone home to his grandmother. He came back Thursday morning at 7:30, and he was not alone. Augusta Longbottom walked through the Gringotts doors with the specific bearing of a woman who has never in her life waited for anyone to open a door for her. She was tall, sharp-featured, in deep green robes with her vulture hat conspicuously absent, replaced with something dark and feathered but significantly more formidable, and her eyes, which were Neville's eyes in a face carved rather than softened, moved across the lobby and found Harry with the immediate precision of a woman who had spent decades locating threats in rooms. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "You're shorter than I expected." "People keep saying that," Harry said. "They're wrong to sound surprised. Power doesn't advertise itself with height." She crossed to him and looked at his right hand and the ring, and something in her face shifted, not surprise exactly, more like the expression of someone who has been told rain is coming and now feels the first drop. "Neville told me everything last night. I asked him not to tell, he told me," she said, with a precision that closed the discussion. "I'm his grandmother. And I'm head of the allied house of Longbottom, which means this matter is mine as much as it is his." She looked at him steadily. "I knew James and Lily Potter. Not well, but well enough. And I knew what they were trying to protect." Her voice was controlled and clipped, and underneath it was something that had weight. "I also knew Frank and Alice Pruitt, Frank and Alice Longbottom, rather. They were friends with the Pruitts. With Gideon and Fabian. We all were." She paused. "Avery was responsible for my son and daughter-in-law's current condition, Mr. Potter. Not directly, he didn't cast the curse himself. But he provided the location. He told Bellatrix Lestrange where to find them." Her eyes were very clear. "I have been waiting 20 years for a legal mechanism to touch him." Harry looked at her. "I intend to give you one." Augusta Longbottom looked back at him for a long moment. Then she nodded, once, sharp as a blade stroke. "Good. Now, Neville tells me you've selected your father's robes." "Yes. Let me see them." He looked, Hermione told him privately as they waited outside the Wisengamot chamber doors, like someone who had always been going to walk into this room. The robes were deep charcoal with the Potter family crest on the left breast, a stag and a griffin rampant, which Harry had always thought was just a design and now understood as exactly what it was, and the cut was good, his father having been, it turned out, roughly his own dimensions if slightly broader in the shoulder, the Gringotts tailoring charm having handled the difference without fuss. The sovereign's ring was on his right hand. He'd considered leaving it under his robes and rejected the consideration immediately. He was not hiding anything today. Neville was on his left in the formal deep green of House Longbottom. Augusta was behind them, straight-backed and deliberate. Hermione was, not coming in. She wasn't a member of any house, had no legal standing in the chamber, and the law was the law. She'd pointed this out herself, with the particular quality of someone making a factual observation they are not happy about. "I'll be in the gallery," she said. "They allow observers." "Take notes," Harry said. She gave him the look this deserved. "Obviously." The chamber doors were 2 inches of solid dark oak banded in iron, flanked by ministry aurors in red robes who looked, as Harry approached, like people who had been told something unexpected was going to happen but not specifically what. One of them, young, sandy-haired, tense, stepped forward. "I'll need to see your—" Harry held up the ring. The Auror looked at it. Then he looked at the other Auror. Some rapid and wordless communication occurred. "Lord Potter," the first Auror said carefully, "the session is, the Wisengamot has already convened." "I know," Harry said. "That's why I'm here." He pushed through the doors. The Wisengamot chamber was circular and tiered, the kind of room built to make people feel small, high stone ceiling, torchlight, the purple-robed members arranged in ascending rows around a central floor. At the high bench, Madame Bones sat as senior under-secretary in place of the chief warlock's seat, which was Dumbledore's and which was conspicuously empty today. Beside her, rigid and pink in a way that managed to be aggressive, sat Dolores Umbridge. Fudge was in the front row of the member seating, in ministerial green, and he was talking to the wizard beside him in the urgent, low tone of someone trying to get ahead of something they don't fully understand. He looked up when the doors opened. The room took a moment to register Harry's entrance. Then it registered it all at once, a ripple of recognition moving through the chamber in a wave, heads turning, the low murmur of an audience that has been expecting something and is suddenly uncertain whether it was prepared for it. Harry walked to the center of the chamber floor. He didn't hurry. He didn't look around at the faces. He walked to the center, stood there, and waited. Madame Bones looked at him from the high bench with an expression that was, Harry thought, more alert than surprised. She was a solid, square-jawed witch with a monocle and a reputation, even in the Prophet, for being principled to an inconvenient degree. She glanced at the documents in front of her, Ragnar's filing, Harry assumed, which should have been distributed to all members yesterday evening. "Lord Potter," she said, and her voice was measured and professionally neutral. "The Wisengamot acknowledges your presence. You have sovereign voice under the compact of the sovereign land, which the clerk's office has," a slight pause, verified as legally operative. "You may speak." The chamber was very quiet. Fudge stood up. "Madame Bones," he began. "Minister," Madame Bones said, "the compact is not subject to ministerial override. Lord Potter has the floor." Fudge sat down with the particular rigidity of a man who is furious and has no legal mechanism for it. Harry looked around the chamber. All those faces, purple robes, varying degrees of alarm, curiosity, calculation, and in the far left tier, almost hidden by his own careful positioning, Cassius Avery, who looked like a man watching a building fall toward him and calculating the odds of moving fast enough. Avery was perhaps 60, silver-haired, patrician, with the kind of face that had probably been described as distinguished for 40 years. He was watching Harry with the cold assessment of a man who did not panic, who moved in careful deliberate lines, who had spent 2 decades building something patient and intricate. His eyes moved from Harry's face to the ring and back, and whatever he saw in the combination settled into his expression as something that was not quite fear but was adjacent to it. Harry looked at him for exactly 1 second. Then he looked away. "Thank you, Madame Bones," Harry said. His voice was steady and he didn't push it for volume, the chamber's acoustics did the work, carrying the words upward and around in the way of rooms built for exactly this. "I'll be as brief as I can. Some of you have the filing from Gringotts. Some of you are seeing me for the first time today and are working from rumor and assumption. I'll address both groups at once." He paused for a single beat. "My name is Harry James Potter. Yesterday I formally accepted the lordship of 22 houses of the British wizarding nobility, including the sovereign House Emrys and the Royal House Pendragon. I am also, as of the dissolution of 3 illegal suppression charms placed on my person without my knowledge or consent, the operative holder of the Cursed King title under the compact of the sovereign land." He reached into his robes and withdrew a folded document, Gringotts certified, sealed with their stamp, one of a set Ragnar had prepared. He set it on the floor in front of him and spoke a word, and the document unfolded and lifted and the pages spread in the air around him in a slow rotation, each one carrying a Gringotts seal that glowed gold in the torchlight. "The documentation is certified by Gringotts under Goblin banking law and is available to the clerk's office for verification. I am exercising sovereign voice today to make 3 specific announcements, and 1 formal challenge under sovereign right. The murmur in the chamber was building. Fudge had gone an alarming shade of red. Umbridge, beside Madame Bones, had her lips pressed into a thin line and her hands folded in her lap and was watching Harry with the particular expression of someone filing information to be dealt with in a controlled environment later. Harry was aware of her. He noted her, assessed her, and moved on. First announcement. He kept his voice level. Lord Cassius Avery has been holding proxy caretaker seats for houses Pruitt, Bones, and Selwyn. His proxy authority for all 3 is void as of today, as a direct heir with superior claim has emerged. The seats revert immediately under the Noble House Charter of 1612. He looked directly at Avery when he said it. Avery met his gaze. He was very still. Second announcement. The dormancy declarations for houses Pruitt and Bones, processed in 1981 by then-Deputy Under-Secretary Colby Thorne, are under formal review by Gringotts and will be challenged through the legal mechanism available under my sovereign right. He paused. Mr. Thorne received an unusual financial transfer the month after both declarations were approved. We have the Gringotts record. The murmur became something louder. Somewhere in the upper tiers a wizard made a sharp sound of protest. Avery's expression didn't change, but his hands, folded on the rail in front of him, went very slightly white at the knuckles. Third announcement. Under sovereign voice, I am formally registering the following statement for the Wisengamot record. Lord Voldemort returned to a physical body on June 24th of this year, at the graveyard of Little Hangleton, using a ritual that required my blood. He was witnessed by myself, by the ghost of Cedric Diggory's last moments, and by a gathering of Death Eaters whose names I am prepared to give to this body in full written deposition. He looked at Fudge directly. The Ministry's position that this event did not occur is a matter of institutional policy, not fact. I am placing the deposition on record so that when the policy is eventually revised, the Wisengamot will have no grounds to claim it was not warned. The chamber erupted. Not everyone, perhaps half, the older members, some of the ones Harry didn't recognize, shouting or standing or talking at each other with the particular energy of people whose careful equilibrium has been disturbed. Fudge was on his feet. Umbridge had a hand on Fudge's arm and was speaking to him in a low, rapid voice. Madame Bones struck the high bench 3 times with her wand and the noise subsided, not entirely, but enough. Lord Potter, she said, and her voice was very controlled. You mentioned a formal challenge. Yes, Harry said. Under sovereign right of challenge, I am formally challenging Educational Decree 43, the Ministry-appointed oversight role at Hogwarts School, on the grounds that it represents an unconstitutional interference with a private magical institution and a violation of the Hogwarts Founding Compact which predates Ministry authority. He looked at Umbridge. Not with anger. Just directly, the way you look at a problem you are solving. The challenge creates a mandatory review period during which the decree cannot be enforced. During that review period, any individual appointed under the decree cannot exercise authority at Hogwarts. The review period is set by the compact at 30 days. Umbridge's expression did not change. She was good, she was genuinely good at the controlled surface. But her hands, still folded in her lap, had stiffened. Madame Bones, she said, her voice a sweet reasonable tone that Harry had the immediate instinct to distrust completely, surely the validity of this challenge requires verification of the compact itself. The compact's validity was verified by the Wisengamot clerk's office yesterday evening, Madame Bones said, and Harry caught the particular quality in her voice. She had been waiting for this, or something like it, and she was not sorry it was happening. The review period is operative as stated, beginning today. She looked at Harry. Is there anything further, Lord Potter? One more thing, Harry said. As holder of the Bones and Pruitt House seats, I will be meeting with Susan Bones and the Weasley family to discuss the history of those houses and their options. I mention this publicly so that no one can later claim they weren't aware of my intentions. He looked around the chamber one more time, the faces arrayed in tears, the torchlight, the centuries of accumulated power in this room, all of it oriented toward the center where he stood, 15 years old and entirely comfortable. "Thank you for your time." He gathered the floating documents from the air with a gesture and walked out the way he'd come in. The corridor outside the chamber was long and stone-floored and empty except for Hermione, who had apparently come down from the gallery to meet him and was standing 20 feet from the doors with her notepad and her expression. He pushed through the doors and they swung shut behind him, and in the muffled noise of the chamber continuing to combust behind the oak and iron he stood in the corridor and let out a breath. "Well," Hermione said. "Well," he agreed. "You just told the Wizengamot Voldemort is back. On the record." "Yes. And removed Umbridge's legal authority to be at Hogwarts before she even gets there. For 30 days. Then we'll need to find another mechanism. And took Avery's proxy seats." "Yes." She looked at him. "How do you feel?" Harry considered. "Hungry. I haven't eaten since this morning." She made a sound that was half laugh and half something else. "Harry. I feel good," he said, and meant it. "I feel like something is moving instead of standing still." He paused. "Avery is going to do something. He didn't get where he is by absorbing hits quietly." "I know. And Dumbledore is going to hear about today by this afternoon." "I know that too." She fell into step beside him as they moved down the corridor. "Are you ready for that conversation?" "No," Harry said honestly. "But I'm going to have it anyway." Behind them, the chamber doors burst open and Fudge came through them with 2 ministry officials flanking him and the expression of a man who has decided that forward momentum is the only option. "Potter," he called down the corridor. "Potter, I need to speak with you immediately." Harry turned. He waited while Fudge closed the distance, breathing hard, his green hat slightly askew. "Minister," Harry said. "This, what you just did in there," Fudge stopped, seemed to be searching for language that was official enough. "These claims, this Gringotts business, you can't simply walk in and destabilize." "I can," Harry said. "Under the compact. Which your own clerk verified. The compact it's a historical document, it hasn't been operative it's been operative the whole time. Nobody's been here to use it." Harry kept his voice even. "Minister, with respect, and I mean that, I'm not being sarcastic, you're in a difficult position. The decree challenge is legally solid. You can appeal through the Wizengamot standard review process, which takes 30 days minimum, during which the review period remains in force. You can also try to argue the compact's validity in front of the Wizengamot, which means having that conversation on the record, which means having a very public discussion about whether the oldest magical authority in Britain supersedes ministry decrees. You don't want that discussion." He paused. "Or you can let the review run, reassign Madame Umbridge to something else for a month, and we can have a separate conversation about the current threat level from Voldemort, which is, I assure you, a conversation worth having before it becomes unavoidable." Fudge stared at him. He was an experienced political animal, whatever his failures of courage, he'd survived decades of ministry politics, and Harry could see him processing the landscape, checking exits, calculating. "You're 15, Fudge said, as if this were an argument. "Yes," Harry said. "And I have the legal authority of 22 houses and a sovereign compact. The Wizengamot knows it. Gringotts has certified it. The Prophet is going to know about it by tomorrow regardless of what you say to me in this corridor." He kept his tone reasonable. "I'm not your enemy, Minister. I'm not trying to take your job or run the ministry. I'm trying to make sure that when Voldemort moves, and he will move, and it won't be subtle, the wizarding world isn't caught looking the wrong direction." Fudge's face went through several stages. Then he said, very quietly, "If what you're saying is true, it is. The implications are significant." "Yes." Harry paused. "Think about it. That's all I'm asking." He turned and walked away, and Fudge did not call after him again. Ragnar had arranged a private meeting room off the main Gringotts lobby for after the session, and it was there that Neville and Augusta found them, Augusta moving with the brisk energy of someone who has watched something satisfying happen and is now ready to work. Avery will go to ground, she said, sitting down without preamble. He's been operating in the open because he's never had to do otherwise. He has allies, the Wisengamot bloc, 3 of them at minimum who have been voting his way on everything from blood status legislation to the goblin reparations bill. Today will have frightened him. Frightened men are dangerous. He'll try to find leverage, Harry said. Something he can use against me before the Pruitt and Bones seats are formally confirmed. He'll look at your friends, Augusta said. That's how his type operates. Direct attack on you is too visible now. But your associations, Hermione's Muggleborn, Harry said. That's the first thing he'll use. Hermione, who had been making notes across the table, looked up. He can try. Hermione, I know what he'd try to use. Blood status discrimination legislation. Section 3 of the Heritage Registry Act, the one that requires Muggleborn witches and wizards to re-register their wand permits annually with character references from a pure-blood sponsor. Avery helped draft that law 12 years ago. She set her quill down. He can try. But under your sovereign right of challenge, that law is challengeable. It was enacted after the Founding Compact and it discriminates against British magical subjects, which the Compact explicitly protects. Her eyes were very clear. You could challenge it. Not just for me, for everyone it applies to. Harry looked at her for a moment. Yes, he said. I could. Is that, Neville started. Is that too many fronts at once? We're not fighting anyone, Harry said. We're using legal mechanisms that have always existed. Avery can't counter a sovereign right challenge with anything except a legal argument. His legal argument would have to go in front of a Wisengamot that now knows the compact is operative. He paused. The Ministry's weapons are laws and decrees. The compact is older than all of them. We keep doing exactly what we're doing. Augusta looked at him with an expression that had shifted from the sharp assessment of a rival to something more settled. James Potter used to make that face, she said. When he'd worked something through and was certain of it. Harry absorbed this. You said you knew my parents. Not well. Well enough to know that your father had your mother's judgment disguised as his own instinct. She paused. She was the strategist. He was the one who made it look effortless. She looked at him directly. You seem to have both. It was the most personal thing she'd said. Harry didn't deflect it. He just nodded. Ragnar came in through the side door at this point, which was his habit. He always appeared as if he'd been waiting just outside for the conversation to reach the natural end of one phase and the beginning of another. He had a parchment in his hand. Avery has filed a formal contestation of the proxy seat revocation, he said. As expected. He's arguing that your Peveril maternal claim is insufficient to supersede the Noble House Charter's caretaker provisions. He sat down and placed the parchment on the table. His legal argument is weak. We anticipated it. Our counterfiling is ready. Good, Harry said. What else? There is a separate matter. Ragnar's tone shifted slightly. We have received an owl from Albus Dumbledore. The room went quiet in a particular way. What does it say? Harry asked. Ragnar unfolded a separate note. I would very much appreciate the opportunity to speak with Harry at his earliest convenience. I have a great deal to explain and I believe the explanation is overdue. I am at Hogwarts and will remain there until Harry chooses to come. Ragnar refolded. No demands. No urgency. No attempt at legal or institutional pressure. He knows he can't pressure me legally, Harry said. And he knows attempting it would be worse than not. He looked at the table. He's leaving it to me. Which is, in its own way, a form of control, Hermione said quietly. Making himself available, patient, non-threatening. It puts the emotional weight on you. If you don't go, you're the one making the choice to leave things unresolved. If you go, if I go, he gets to explain himself, Harry said. And Dumbledore's explanations they're good. He's genuinely intelligent and he genuinely believes what he does is necessary. He paused. I'm going. Just not today. He looked at Ragnarok. Can we send word to Mrs. Weasley? And to Susan Bones' family? I want those conversations to happen before the formal seat confirmations. We can arrange it, Ragnarok said. And I need to go back to Privet Drive. He said it without particular feeling. Just to collect my things. I won't be spending another summer there. Augusta made a sharp sound. Absolutely not. No heir of a noble house sleeps in a, Neville told me about the Dursleys, Mr. Potter. No. You'll stay at Longbottom Manor until term. Harry looked at her. I am not asking, she said. All right, Harry said. Thank you. She nodded, brisk and final. Good. Now. The Bones meeting, I know Amelia Bones. She's a good woman. This conversation needs to be handled carefully. The House Bones seat is significant and she's protective of her family. She paused. I'll come with you. As allied house. I'd appreciate that. And the Weasley conversation, Molly is, Augusta paused for the first time, the brisk pace of her speech slowing slightly. Molly Pruitt lost her brothers to this war. She has never talked about it, to my knowledge. You handing her the House Pruitt title and Wisengamot seat is not simply a political transaction. You understand that? Yes, Harry said. I know. Good. Augusta stood. I'll arrange transport back to the manor. Neville, come. She moved toward the door and then stopped, her back to the room, and said without turning, Mr. Potter. What you did today in that chamber. A pause. Your parents would have been insufferably proud. Both of them. She left before he could respond, which he suspected was intentional. Neville caught his eye on the way out and gave him a small nod, not sympathy exactly, more acknowledgement, the specific nod of someone who understands that some things land hard and the right response is to let them. They collected Harry's things from Privet Drive that evening. He'd been half expecting a scene, Vernon's face going purple, Petunia's tight disapproval crystallizing into something more pointed, but the house was quiet when he arrived, just him and the Gringotts arranged portkey back to Longbottom Manor, and he went upstairs and packed his trunk in about 20 minutes. It didn't take long because there was never much to take. Some books. His photo album. The firebolt. The box from the vault, which he'd carried back with him and which was the most important thing in the room. He was carrying the trunk down the stairs when Petunia appeared in the hallway. She looked at the trunk. She looked at him. She was wearing her garden clothes and she had the expression she'd been wearing at him his whole life, the one he'd always interpreted as distaste but which he now, with a strange and sudden clarity, saw differently. It was not distaste. It was fear. Not of him specifically. Of everything he represented, everything she'd spent her life building her house against. Are you coming back? She asked. No, Harry said. Something moved in her face. He watched for relief and didn't find it clearly, found something more complicated, something that had relief in it but other things around it. Your mother, she said, and stopped. Harry waited. Petunia Dursley looked at her hallway floor. She used to say you be something. Before, she stopped again. She knew you be something. Harry stood on the bottom step. Did you know what she was? What her real heritage. The Peveril line. What she actually was. Petunia looked at him sharply. She was my sister. Yes, Harry said. She was. He didn't say anything else. He picked up the trunk and carried it to the door and she didn't stop him and he didn't look back, and if there was something in the air between them, something old and sad and not entirely finished. It would have to remain that way for now, because some things take longer than an evening to resolve. He touched the port key in his pocket. The house vanished. Longbottom Manor was everything Privet Drive was not, old and large and unapologetically magical, its walls hung with portraits that commented on the weather and its garden managed by plants that appeared to have independent opinions about where they wanted to grow. Augusta had given him a guest suite on the second floor with a window that looked east over the grounds, and the bed was good and the room smelled of old wood and beeswax. He lay on top of the covers that night, not quite sleeping, his right hand resting palm up on his chest, the ring warm against his finger. Through the open window the night air came in, cool and dark and full of the particular richness of the English countryside, grass and stone and deep water somewhere underground. He could feel it. Beneath everything, that vast and patient awareness. The land, turning over in its slow consciousness, adjusting itself around his presence the way a body adjusts around a bone finally set right. He could feel the 22 houses too, faintly, like points of warmth scattered across a dark map, the estates standing empty in their various counties, the Gringotts vaults humming with preserved magic, the Wisengamot seats that were now his radiating a low legal frequency he had no better word for. And somewhere in the darkness of what he could feel, something else. Not the land's slow contentment or the house's accumulated weight. Something cold and sharp and deliberate, moving through the political darkness the way predators move, patient, intelligent, aware that the terrain had shifted and recalculating. Avery. He didn't know how he knew. He just did, the way you know about weather before it arrives, something in the air pressure of the situation. Some instinct that had been sitting at the back of his mind since the moment in the chamber when Avery's knuckles had gone white on the rail. He was not going to wait. He sat up in the dark and reached for the quill and parchment on the bedside table. Augusta had put them there, anticipating, as she seemed to anticipate most things, and he wrote 2 short letters. One to Ragnarok, begin the formal review of the Pruitt and Bones dormancy declarations immediately. Don't wait for Avery's contestation to proceed. Let's set the timeline on our terms. 1 to Susan Bones, my name is Harry Potter. I think you've heard about me by now in ways that might not have been entirely accurate. I have some things to tell you about your family. Could we meet at Gringotts this Saturday? I'll explain everything. He signed both, folded them, set them on the desk for the Morning Post, and lay back down. Outside, the land turned in its old sleep, and the candle on the bedside table burned steady and clear and very slightly gold. Chapter 4, Old Debts, Old Enemies. Susan Bones arrived at Gringotts on Saturday with her aunt. Harry had expected this. He'd written to Susan, but of course Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, the most senior law enforcement official in Wizarding Britain, was not going to let her niece walk into a meeting with a 15-year-old who had just detonated a political explosion in the Wisengamot without accompanying her. Harry respected this. He'd told Ragnarok to prepare the meeting room for 4, which Ragnarok had done without comment. Augusta came with Harry. Which meant the room contained 2 heads of noble houses, the most senior law enforcement official in Britain, and a 16-year-old Hufflepuff who was managing the situation with a composure that Harry found immediately impressive. Susan Bones was not what Harry had pictured when he'd pictured Susan Bones from Hufflepuff. He'd known her by sight for 4 years, red-haired, calm, competent in defense, but he hadn't known her properly, the way you don't know people until circumstances force a different angle of light. She sat across the table from him and she was watchful in the way her aunt was watchful, the same quality of attention, and when Harry placed the House Bones documentation on the table between them she looked at it for a long moment before she looked at him. You found this in Gringotts, she said. Yes. And Avery has been holding the seat. For 19 years. Something moved through Susan's face that she didn't entirely conceal. He was at my parents' funeral, she said. He came. He stood in the back and she stopped. I was 6. I remember thinking he looked like he was checking something off a list. The room was very quiet. Amelia Bones had the kind of stillness that came not from calmness but from the disciplined management of its opposite. She was broad-shouldered and direct-eyed, and she'd been watching Harry since she sat down with the particular attention of someone in her profession assessing a witness. Now she looked at the documentation. "The dormancy declaration," she said. "It was processed while I was in hospital. After Edgar and his family," she stopped. "I was told the declaration was automatic. That there was no living male heir and the house transferred to dormancy by default." "You weren't told you could contest it," Harry said. "No. You weren't told that Amelia Bones, the head of the house in everything but formal title, could have filed to maintain the seat in caretaker capacity herself." "No." Her voice was very controlled. "I was not told that. The official who processed it received a financial transfer of 600 galleons the following month," Harry said. "We have the Gringotts record." Amelia Bones set both hands flat on the table and looked at them for a moment. Then she looked at Harry. "What are you asking of us, Lord Potter?" "Nothing, initially," Harry said. "The seat is yours. I'm the formal Lord of House Bones because there's no direct heir, that's just the legal mechanism. But the seat's function, its political weight, should be exercised by your family. I can delegate voting authority to you immediately. Permanently, if you want." He paused. "What I'm asking, eventually, when you're ready, is that the seat be used the way your family would have used it. For the things Edgar Bones and your parents believed in." Susan was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite categorize. "You've known me for 4 years, she said. "We've been in the same defense classes." "You never," she paused. "Why now? Why are you doing this?" Harry considered the question honestly. "Because Avery shouldn't have it. Because your family was wronged. Because the seat belongs to people who'll use it right." He paused. "And because Voldemort is coming back properly, and I'd rather face that with the right people holding power than the wrong ones." Susan held his gaze. "You actually believe that? About Voldemort?" "I was there," he said simply. She nodded. "Once," slowly. Then she looked at her aunt. Some silent communication occurred between them, the particular frequency of people who have been each other's family through hard things. Amelia Bones turned back to Harry. "Delegate the voting authority. We'll exercise the seat." A pause. "And whatever you're building, we're part of it. That's not a favor. That's choosing a side." "That's all I'm asking," Harry said. Augusta, who had been silent throughout with the particular silence of someone letting a younger person handle their own work, made a small sound of approval. Nobody acknowledged it, which seemed to be the correct response. The Weasley meeting was harder. Harry went to the Burrow on Sunday, alone. He'd thought about bringing someone and decided against it. This was not a political transaction, Augusta had been right about that, and the presence of witnesses would make it feel like one. He arrived by Floo and came through the kitchen fireplace to find Molly Weasley already there with flour on her hands and a look on her face that told him she'd been expecting him and had been managing how she felt about it since at least yesterday. Ron was at the kitchen table looking the way Ron looked when he suspected he was missing important context, which was a specific combination of alert and slightly aggrieved. Ginny was on the stairs and clearly had been there for some time with the entirely unconvincing posture of someone who happened to be sitting there for unrelated reasons. "Harry," Molly said, and her voice was warm but careful. "Come and sit down. I'll put the kettle on." "Mrs. Weasley," Harry said, "I know you've probably heard some of what happened this week. Arthur old me Thursday evening," she said, moving to the kettle. "He was in the ministry when your filing came through. He said," she paused, her back to him, "he said you'd done something remarkable." She turned around and looked at him, and her eyes were very bright. "He said you'd reinstated the Pruitt seat." "Yes. And that Avery, his proxy claim on it is void. Gringotts is processing the formal review. It should be complete in 10 days. Molly set down the kettle. She didn't say anything for a moment. "Gideon and Fabian," she said finally. Her voice was very quiet. "They would have, they would have wanted. She stopped and pressed her lips together, and Harry watched her do the thing that people who have been strong for a long time do, which is manage an emotion with the efficiency of long practice. "The seat should be yours," Harry said. "I hold the house title because the legal mechanism requires it, but the seat is Pruitt. It belongs to you and your family. I'll delegate voting authority to you immediately." He paused. "And there's a library in the main Potter vault. Gringotts found correspondence from your brothers in the Pruitt estate archive, personal things, letters, things they kept. They're yours if you want them." Molly Weasley was not, in Harry's experience, a woman who cried easily. She cried now, briefly and without apology, and Harry sat with it and didn't look away or try to fix it, and Ron was looking at the table, and Ginny had abandoned the pretense of being on the stairs for unrelated reasons and was now sitting on the bottom step with her chin in her hands, watching. After a moment Molly dried her eyes with the kind of decisiveness she applied to everything and looked at Harry with a clarity that had replaced the brightness. "My brothers died for what was right," she said. "And someone picked their pockets while they were in the ground." She paused. "Avery." "Yes. Are you going to deal with him?" "I'm going to remove every mechanism he has," Harry said. "Legally. Every proxy seat, every vote, every financial instrument he's accumulated through those seats. And then I'm going to make sure what he did in 1981, the information he gave about your brother's location, is on the official Wisengamot record." She looked at him for a long moment. "You're 15. Everyone keeps saying that," Harry said. "I'm saying it because," she paused, "I want to understand what's actually happening. Not the political parts. You." Harry considered how to answer honestly. "I found out I had something. Power and standing that had been kept from me. And the first thing I thought about was who it could help, not who I could impress, not how I could protect myself." He paused. "Your brothers' names kept coming up in the Pruitt documentation. Every time I read them I thought about Fred and George and Ron and Ginny and, I don't know. It felt wrong to sit on it." Molly looked at him for another long moment. Then she stood up, crossed the kitchen, and hugged him with the full force of a woman who has been hugging people since before Harry was born. He let himself hug back. Over her shoulder Ron was making a face that said this is extremely emotional and I am handling it, and Harry caught his eye and Ron shrugged, and Harry thought that whatever else this week had done, at least the people who mattered understood something true about him now. He'd been at Longbottom Manor for 4 days when he felt Avery move. Not physically, he didn't see anything or receive direct information. It was the instinct he'd had Thursday night, that cold deliberate presence moving through the political dark, and on Sunday evening it sharpened into something more specific. He was in the Manor Library reading through one of the books from the Potter Vault, a history of the Sovereign Compact written in 1423 by a scholar who'd had access to sources since lost, when the ring went warm in a particular way. Different from its usual warmth. More pointed. He set down the book. Hermione was across the library in the corner she'd claimed, surrounded by 3 texts on noble house law and a stack of notes that was threatening to topple. She looked up when he moved. "What?" "Something's happening." She put her quill down immediately. "Avery?" "I think so. Something's moving." He pressed his hand flat against the table, the ring against the wood, and tried to locate the feeling the way you locate a sound in the dark, turning your attention toward it, waiting for it to resolve. "It's legal. Not a direct attack. Something bureaucratic. He's filed something. Or he's about to." Harry stood. "I need to get to Ragnarok." He went by Flo. Longbottom Manor was connected to the Gringotts secure network, which Augusta had arranged with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been conducting serious business through fireplaces for 40 years, and came through into the Gringotts back office to find that Ragnarok was, in fact, already at his desk at 7 in the evening with a document in his hands and an expression that was as close to irritated as Harry had yet seen from him. "Lord Potter," Ragnarok said. "I was about to send for you." "I know. What's he done?" Ragnar set the document on the desk and turned it around. Avery has filed a counter-inheritance petition with the Wisengamot, claiming that your maternal Peveril claim is invalidated by your Muggle-born mother's failure to register the reclamation with the Ministry within the 3-year window specified by the Heritage Registry Act of 1972. He paused. Specifically, the petition argues that because Lily Potter née Evans did not register her bloodline's magical reclamation, the reclamation is legally void, which would strip out the Peveril, Slytherin, Gaunt, and Emery's claims from your inheritance, leaving you with only the paternal Potter line and its allied houses. Harry sat down. He read the document. It was well constructed. Whoever had written the legal argument, and he doubted it was Avery himself, this had the flavor of a ministry solicitor who knew exactly what they were doing, had found a genuine gap. The 1972 Heritage Registry Act was real, the 3-year registration window was real, and his mother had not, as far as anyone knew, registered anything because she hadn't known about the reclamation. Nobody had told her. Which meant Avery was using the deliberate suppression of Harry's inheritance as the legal weapon to strip it away. He set the document down. "That's clever," he said. "Yes," Ragnar said. "He's using the fact that my inheritance was hidden to argue I don't have it." "Yes. Can he win this?" Ragnar was quiet for a moment, which was more unsettling than a direct answer would have been. The 1972 Act is a real statute. The registration requirement is genuine. However, he leaned forward slightly, the Act contains an exemption clause that has never been tested in court. Clause 14, subsection C, registration requirements are void in cases where the reclamation was actively suppressed by magical or legal means without the knowledge of the reclamant. He paused. Your mother could not register what she did not know she had. The question is whether the 1981 blood suppression constitutes sufficient evidence of active suppression to trigger the exemption. The blood suppression we can't identify the caster of, Harry said. Correct. Which means we can establish suppression occurred but potentially not prove it was imposed by an external party rather than, Harry stopped. Rather than my mother herself, to hide the reclamation deliberately. That is the argument Avery's petition implies, yes. Not explicitly, he's too careful for that. But the implication is there for a Wisengamot panel to read. Harry stood up and walked to the window. The Diagon Alley rooftops were dark against the evening sky, chimney pots and old gables, the street below quiet at this hour. He thought about his mother. Small and precise handwriting. Words underlined. A woman who'd grown up in the Muggle world and come into magic at 11 and never, as far as anyone had told him, known what she actually was. What she carried. What she might have given him if she'd known. She hadn't known because someone had made sure of it. And now someone was trying to use that same ignorance to take away what was his. He turned around. Ragnar. The blood suppression, you said the caster's signature was deliberately obfuscated. Does obfuscated mean destroyed, or does it mean someone worked to make it unreadable? Ragnar was very still. It means obscured. The magical signature is present. It has been overlaid. Multiple layers of a masking charm applied over successive years. Who would have had the knowledge and access to mask a magical signature at blood level? Very few practitioners. It is advanced work. Dumbledore, Harry said. Could he have masked it? Not cast the original suppression. Could he have found the suppression that was already on me and masked its origin? Hidden who cast it? Ragnar was quiet for what felt like a long time. Yes, he said. That is technically possible and consistent with what we found. So someone cast the blood suppression in 1981, probably Voldemort, accidentally, as a consequence of the killing curse interacting with the sovereign resonance. And then Dumbledore found it, and instead of removing it, he added his own suppression layers and masked the original so nobody could identify it. Harry worked through it aloud. Because if he removed Voldemort's accidental suppression, my inheritance would have activated. And he didn't want that. For reasons we don't yet, for reasons I intend to find out, Harry said. But right now, the masking layers. They're Dumbledore's work. Which means they can be attributed to Dumbledore. Which means we can prove that the blood suppression was externally imposed and maintained by a third party without my mother's knowledge, which triggers the Clause 14 exemption. Ragnarok looked at him for a long moment. You would need to be willing to put Dumbledore's actions formally on the Gringotts and Wizengamot record. Yes, Harry said. I would. That is, a significant step. He suppressed my inheritance for 14 years without telling me. He suppressed my mother's inheritance from her. He used it as, Harry stopped. He used my mother's not knowing as the mechanism. She didn't register the reclamation because she didn't know about it because he made sure it stayed hidden. He paused, and the pause was not for effect but because he was genuinely working through the emotion of it, not letting it drive, not burying it. He has reasons. I believe that. I'm going to hear those reasons. But they don't change what was done. Ragnarok stood. I will begin preparing the counterpetition documentation. We will need a formal Gringotts affidavit attributing the masking work to Dumbledore based on signature analysis. That will require our senior inheritance cursebreaker to prepare an expert report. He paused. It will take 48 hours. Do it. Harry turned back to the window. Somewhere in Diagon Alley, a door opened and let out a rectangle of warm light and a snatch of conversation and then swung shut again. The street was quiet. Normal. The world going about itself. He felt, through the ring, the land turn beneath him like a vast slow breath. The 48 hours gave him time to do something he'd been putting off. He went to the Potter Vault alone on Monday morning while Hermione and Neville were at the manor, and he spent 4 hours in it. Not reading the letters again, he'd done that and those were his, those were internal and private and belonged to him in a way that was separate from everything else. He went to the library section. The Peveril texts were there. Several of them, old enough that handling them required a protective charm that Ragnarok's assistant helped him apply, and they were written in a mixture of Old English and Latin and in one case a script that Harry couldn't identify until the ring warmed against his hand and he looked at the page again and found he could read it. The script was Old British. The language was the same one as the compact. He sat with this for a moment. The ring was giving him languages. Or rather, the sovereign resonance included a linguistic inheritance, the accumulated knowledge of every sovereign who had ever held the compact, and it surfaced when needed the way memory surfaces, not forced, just there when you looked. The text was a journal. Not formal historical record, a personal account, written in a voice that was direct and occasionally frustrated and sometimes funny in a dry, understated way that felt, uncomfortably, familiar. The writer was not named. He referred to himself only as the voice of the land, which was the sovereign's formal title, but the personality behind it was present on every page. He read for 2 hours. What he learned was not entirely what the compact's formal language had suggested. The sovereign land connection was not simply a power transfer, it was genuinely a relationship, a two-way thing, the land and the sovereign in constant communication, the land providing power and the sovereign providing. The journal's word was witness. Presence. Attention. The land didn't want a weapon. It wanted someone who would pay attention to it, who would notice when something was wrong, who would care about the old places and the deep waters and the stone beneath everything. The land is not political, the journal said, in the blunt style its writer favored. It does not care about the Wizengamot or the Goblin Bank or the arguments of men who build their importance out of other men's diminishment. It cares about whether the old oaks are respected and whether the water in the deep aquifers is clean and whether the boundary stones are standing. When I ignore these things to manage the small politics of court, it makes its displeasure known through weather and strange earth. When I pay attention, it is generous beyond measure. Harry sat with this for a while, the vault quiet around him, the green gold flames patient and steady. He thought about Hogwarts. The lake and the forbidden forest and the grounds, the old stones of the castle that had always felt, to him, more like home than any building he'd lived in. He thought about the way the castle sometimes seemed to respond, doors opening or closing at convenient moments, corridors rearranging themselves with slightly more purpose than usual. He'd always attributed this to Hogwarts' general sentience, its accumulated magic. He wondered now if it had also been responding to him. He stayed in the vault until early afternoon, reading. When he left he carried 2 books with him, the journal and a text on sovereign land communication that was considerably more practical than the journal, written in the manner of an instruction manual by someone who had clearly found the intuitive approach insufficient. Hermione was in the manor library when he got back and she looked at the books and he handed her the instruction manual and she sat down immediately and began reading without saying anything, which was the best possible response. Tuesday evening Ragnarok sent word that the counterpetition was ready. Harry went to Gringotts and read through the affidavit carefully. Ragnarok's cursebreaker had done meticulous work. The analysis of the masking layers was detailed and precise, demonstrating through 3 different analytical methods that the layers over the blood suppression were Dumbledore's work, applied in 3 separate instances between 1981 and 1993. The expert report was the kind of document that was very difficult to argue with because it had no opinion in it, just method and finding. He signed off on it. He did it steadily and without hesitation, and when he handed it back to Ragnarok he felt the weight of what he'd just done settle on him the way a decision settles, not light, but clean. "File it," he said. "It will reach Dumbledore," Ragnarok said. "Not a warning. Just information." "I know. It will also reach Avery, as the opposing party in the petition." "Also fine." Harry paused. "How does Avery's petition look now? Against the Clause 14 exemption and the evidence of external suppression?" "His argument collapses," Ragnarok said simply. "The exemption is clear and our evidence directly satisfies its conditions. Any competent Wisengamot panel will dismiss his petition." He paused. "Avery is not a stupid man. He will see this when the counterpetition reaches him." "How do you think he'll respond?" "By escalating," Ragnarok said. "He has lost 2 proxy seats and his legal challenge is about to fail. He has invested 19 years in the position he's built. Men who have built patiently over decades do not accept reversal gracefully. He will move to something more direct." "How direct?" "That depends on how much he has left to lose." Ragnarok looked at Harry steadily. "He has 2 remaining proxy seats, Selwyn and 1 additional house I have not yet confirmed. He has Wisengamot allies he can call on. He has financial resources and, we believe, ongoing Death Eater connections that were never prosecuted after 1981 because the evidence was insufficient." A pause. "He also has information. We believe he knows things about the suppression of your inheritance, not everything, but enough to have understood its value. He may have been the one who suggested the strategy to Dumbledore, or to whoever was managing the situation in 1981. Harry went very still. "You think he knew about the suppressions?" "We think it is possible that Avery knew you were the sovereign heir and that knowledge informed his decision to build influence over the dormant houses you'd eventually claim." Ragnarok paused. "If you were going to accumulate proxy power against a future claimant, which houses would you choose?" "The ones most likely to transfer to that claimant when they emerged." Harry looked at the desk. Then he looked up. "He built his entire position around me. Around the expectation that I'd eventually appear and claim what was mine. Not to welcome you," Ragnarok said. "To be in the strongest possible position when you arrived. To own as much leverage as possible so that your emergence, when it came, would be manageable. Negotiable. Something he could work with rather than something that eliminated him. He wanted to be the one I had to deal with." "Yes. Instead I took the pieces off the board before he could use them." "Yes." Ragnarok allowed himself that small expression that was not quite a smile. "He has had a difficult week." Harry stood. He looked at the filing in Ragnarok's hands. "What does he actually care about? Underneath all the position and the proxy seats, what does Avery actually want?" Ragnarok considered this seriously. "Safety," he said. He was a Death Eater. He served Voldemort and escaped prosecution by claiming Imperius and providing minimal cooperation with the Ministry investigation. He has spent 20 years building a position that makes him untouchable, too embedded in the Wizengamot, too financially connected, too useful to too many people. His proxy seats are not about power for its own sake. They are insurance. A pause. If Voldemort returns to full power, Avery needs to be useful enough to be kept. If the Ministry remains dominant, Avery needs to be embedded enough to be protected. He has been building survival, Mr. Potter. Very expensive, very patient survival. Harry absorbed this. And now Voldemort has returned. Yes. Which means Avery has a decision to make. The Ministry has been his cover, but the Ministry is refusing to acknowledge Voldemort's return, which means staying Ministry adjacent means being in the wrong camp when the truth becomes unavoidable. He worked through it. He needs to position himself with Voldemort again. But doing that openly means abandoning the Ministry protection he's built. And he can't do either while I'm pulling his infrastructure apart from underneath him. You understand him, Ragnarok said. I understand that he's trapped, Harry said. Which makes him more dangerous, not less. Yes, Ragnarok said. Precisely. Harry walked to the window. Diagon Alley again, Tuesday evening, a different quality of light than Sunday, longer shadows, the summer tipping slightly toward its end without surrendering fully. A witch walked past below with shopping bags and a cat on a lead, and the complete mundane normality of it felt, in the context of this conversation, very fragile. He'll try to reach Voldemort, Harry said. Not to report on me, Voldemort will know about me from his own sources. To offer something. Services. Information. Whatever he has that makes him valuable again. He turned back to Ragnarok. What does he have that Voldemort would want? Access, Ragnarok said. Avery can move through the Ministry and the Wizengamot freely. He can identify targets, block investigations, channel resources. In the early stages of a return to power, that kind of embedded access is extremely valuable. So he becomes Voldemort's man inside the Ministry. Which is what he was in the First War. Harry paused. Can we use that? Ragnarok looked at him carefully. What are you suggesting? Not now. Not yet. But if we know he's going to Voldemort, and we know what he's going to offer, Harry paused. There might be a way to make what he offers useless. Or worse than useless. You're suggesting we allow him to complete the move and then undermine the value of the intelligence he provides. If we control what he knows, we control what Voldemort learns from him. At least partially. Harry shook his head. I'm not saying we do it now. I'm saying we watch him and we think about it. The option might be worth something later. Ragnarok was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I have underestimated you, I think. Everyone does, Harry said. I find it useful. He said goodnight to Ragnarok and left through the flue, and as he came through the fireplace at Longbottom Manor and stepped into the warm library light, he found Hermione still at the table with the instruction manual in one hand and a cup of cold tea in the other, and she looked up at him with the expression of someone who has found something important in a text. Harry, she said. The Land Communication Chapter. The part about sovereign challenge of dark magic on protected ground. What about it? Hogwarts is protected ground, she said. Specifically listed in the appendix. Historic sovereign sites. The Hogwarts grounds were established on land that was sovereign claimed in the 5th century. The school was built on that claim. She paused. Which means I have direct authority on the Hogwarts grounds, Harry said. Not through the Board of Governors. Not through the Ministry. Through the Compact. Through the oldest legal mechanism in Britain, she said. Yes. They looked at each other. Umbridge is still coming, Harry said. The 30-day review period protects against the educational decree. But she could find other ways, claim a teaching position, find alternate legal standing, not on sovereign ground, Hermione said. Not if you formally claim the Hogwarts site under compact authority. She paused. It would need to be done before term starts. When does term start? 5 weeks. Harry sat down across from her. What does a formal sovereign site claim involve? She pushed the instruction manual toward him and pointed to the relevant page. He read it. It was not simple, it required a physical presence on the site, a formal invocation in Old British, and the land's acknowledgement, which the manual described as something that would be unmistakable when it occurred. I'd need to be at Hogwarts, he said. Yes. The grounds, specifically. Before term. Harry looked at the page. Then he looked at the ring on his right hand, which had been quietly warm all evening and was now, with the decision forming, something closer to bright. I'll write to McGonagall, he said. She'll let us in. She won't ask more questions than necessary and she won't tell Dumbledore before we've done it. How do you know? Because she's been watching what Fudge is doing to her school, Harry said, and she is not happy about it. She's been loyal to Dumbledore her whole life but she's loyal to Hogwarts first. He paused. She'll want to know why. I'll tell her the truth. And after you claim the Hogwarts site? What does that change? Harry thought about it honestly. It means that anything dark or coercive attempted on those grounds, any legal decree that violates the rights of the students there, can be challenged and removed by sovereign authority. Directly. Without waiting for a Wisengamot review. He paused. It means if Umbridge tries to use Veritaserum on students, or physically harms anyone, anything that would constitute a violation of a British magical subject's rights, I can stop it. Not with politics. With the compact. Hermione was quiet for a moment. The last time the sovereign site authority was invoked, she said, looking at the manual, was in 912 CE. Then it's overdue, Harry said. She looked at him. The library was warm and quiet and outside the manor windows the sky had gone the deep blue of late evening, the first stars appearing over the Longbottom grounds, and the land beneath everything turned in its slow awareness with a patience that had been measured in centuries and was now, finally, running out. Harry, Hermione said, and her voice had that quality it sometimes had, careful, not cautious, the difference between weighing words and being afraid of them. Are you all right? Actually. All of this, the vault, your parents' letters, Dumbledore, Avery, it's a lot for a week. He thought about answering the strategic version of the question. He thought about answering with I'm fine the way he'd been answering that question for years. It's a lot, he said instead. Some of it is, the letters. The things from my parents. That's its own thing and I'm still working through it. He paused. But most of it doesn't feel like a burden. It feels like I've been walking in the wrong-sized shoes my whole life and someone finally gave me shoes that fit. He paused. Is that strange? No, she said immediately. No, that makes complete sense. They sat for a while in companionable quiet, the instruction manual between them, the fire burning low. Then Hermione picked up her quill and said, I've drafted a letter to McGonagall. Do you want to read it before we send it? Yes, Harry said. Always. She handed it across and he read it, and it was good, precise and clear and warm in exactly the right places, and he made one small edit and handed it back and she made a face at the edit that was mostly performative and added it anyway. The owl went out at midnight. By morning they had an answer. McGonagall's reply was 6 words, come Thursday. I'll leave the gate open. Chapter 5, The Reckoning. McGonagall was waiting at the gates when they arrived Thursday morning. She stood with her hands clasped in front of her, in teaching robes despite it being the height of summer, her hair in its usual severe bun, and she watched the 3 of them come up the path, Harry, Hermione, Neville, with an expression that Harry had seen before on her face and had usually associated with him being in trouble. This was the same expression but pointed at a different problem. and there was something underneath the severity that he recognized as the particular tension of someone who has been holding a difficult thought alone for some time. She looked at Harry directly. Her eyes moved to the ring, stayed there for a moment, then came back up. "Lord Potter," she said, and the title in her mouth was not ironic or ceremonial but simply exact, a precise woman using a precise word. "Professor," Harry said. "Thank you for having us." "Come inside," she said, and pushed the gate open. She took them to her office rather than the main entrance, which meant a side path along the castle wall and up a back staircase, and Harry noticed as they walked that the grounds were doing something. Not dramatically, not trembling or flaring with unnatural light. Just the kind of quiet heightened awareness that a room has when someone important enters it. The grass was very green. The lake was very still. The sky above the castle was a blue so clear it almost hurt, and the old stones of the walls seemed to have a quality of attention in them that Harry had always half noticed and never found adequate explanation for. Until now. McGonagall's office was tidy and precise and smelled of parchment and the faintest trace of something floral that Harry suspected she would deny if asked. She sat behind her desk and they took the 3 chairs facing it, and she looked at each of them in turn with the particular attention of a woman who had been teaching for decades and could read a room of young people the way others read text. "Tell me what you need from me," she said. "Not the political background. I've read the Wisengamot filings. I don't need the history of the compact. Tell me what you came to do and what it requires." Harry had a deep appreciation for efficiency. "I need to formally claim the Hogwarts grounds as a sovereign site under the Compact of the Sovereign Land. The grounds were established on 5th century sovereign-claimed land and are listed in the Compact's Appendix of Protected Sites. The claim requires a physical invocation on the grounds themselves." McGonagall was quiet for a moment. "What does the claim mean for Hogwarts?" "It means any legal decree or ministry order that violates the rights of people on these grounds can be challenged and removed by sovereign authority. Immediately and directly." He paused. "It means if someone tries to use Hogwarts as an instrument to harm the students here, I can stop it." She looked at him for a long moment. "Dolores Umbridge. Among other possibilities. The educational decree challenge you filed gives us 30 days, she said. But Fudge is already looking for alternative mechanisms. There's a ministry provision for emergency school oversight that doesn't require a formal decree, it can be activated by the minister's written order alone. He's been looking at it." She paused, and the quality of her pause had something in it. "Albus is aware of it too. He's been managing the situation." "Managing it how?" Harry asked. She looked at him carefully. Not evasively, McGonagall was not an evasive woman, but carefully, in the way someone looks when they're trying to be fair to a person who is not in the room. "He's been in communication with Fudge. Attempting to slow the process. Arguing the ministry's case against their own decree in Wisengamot committee hearings." She paused. "He's been doing what he can. Within the limits of what he's willing to do," Harry said. A pause. "Yes. He has more tools available than he's using," Harry said. "He's the chief warlock. He has enormous political standing. If he chose to mobilize fully, he's trying to preserve the relationship with the ministry because he believes a total break will be catastrophic," McGonagall said. Her voice was controlled but there was something underneath it. "He's always trying to keep 17 plates spinning at once and he believes the best way to do that is never to let any of them fall." She stopped. "I don't entirely disagree with him. I disagree with his methods." She looked at Harry directly. "I've disagreed with several of his methods for several years." Harry filed this. "He's coming, isn't he? To Hogwarts. Today." McGonagall's expression told him what her words didn't. "He heard I was here," Harry said. "Not a question." "He heard you'd written to me," she said. "He asked if I'd seen you. I told him you were coming today." A pause. "I didn't tell him when. How long do we have?" She glanced at the window and the angle of morning light. He said he'd be in his office from midday. Right. Harry stood. Then let's do this before midday. The grounds were quiet in the way they were quiet in summer, deeply, completely, the absence of students giving the place a different character, the lake and the lawns and the old stone existing for themselves rather than as backdrop. Harry walked out through the main doors with Hermione and Neville beside him, crossed the top of the stone steps, and stopped. He could feel it more strongly here than anywhere else he'd been. The land's awareness, that vast underlying consciousness, was close here, closer than at Longbottom Manor, closer than in London, so close it felt like standing in shallow water and feeling the current. The castle grounds breathed with it. He wondered, standing there, how he had spent 7 years at Hogwarts and not recognized what the place was, and then he thought about the suppression sitting on him like a stone lid and answered his own question. Hermione had the instruction manual in her bag. She'd read the invocation chapter twice the previous evening and written out the relevant Old British text on a card, though she'd mentioned, with some frustration, that she couldn't be certain of the pronunciation since Old British phonology was largely reconstructed. Harry had not mentioned that this was probably not going to be a problem. He walked down the stone steps and out onto the grass, and with each step the ground felt more specific under him, more present, the way a voice becomes clearer as you move toward its source. He walked to the center of the lawn in front of the castle, equidistant from the lake and the walls, and stopped. Hermione and Neville stood back. He looked at the card she'd given him. The words were there in her neat handwriting, the phonetic approximations marked above each syllable. He didn't need them. He already knew the words. They were in the ring, in the sovereign inheritance, sitting in his memory the way the languages had sat, not studied, just present. He folded the card and put it in his pocket, and Hermione made a small concerned sound behind him, and he turned briefly and looked at her. "I've got it," he said. She pressed her lips together and nodded, the gesture of someone extending trust they hope is warranted. Harry turned back to face the castle. He didn't close his eyes. He didn't raise his arms or make any particular gesture, because the compact's instruction was not about gesture. The journal had been explicit on this. The sovereign did not perform the connection, they stated it, simply and directly, because the land was not waiting to be convinced. It was waiting to be acknowledged. He spoke. Not loudly. Conversationally, almost. The old British words came out clean and unhurried, the language finding a natural rhythm in his mouth as if it had always been there, and as he spoke the ring went from warm to genuinely hot on his hand, not painful but vivid, and beneath his feet he felt the ground, not shake. Not rumble. Something more subtle. The way water feels when a current begins, not the surface motion but the deep directional pull. The ground oriented toward him. The old land claim recognizing its sovereign and recognizing the invocation and completing the circuit that had been open since the 5th century. The lake went still. Absolutely still, every ripple flattening in concentric rings as if someone had smoothed a hand across its surface. The forbidden forest went quiet, not the alert quiet of animals freezing, but the settled quiet of a room where someone has just spoken something true. The castle's stones, the walls and towers and the great front door, seemed to do something that was not physical, some quality of their presence sharpened, the way a sleeping person sharpens when something wakes them. And then, from everywhere and nowhere specifically, there was an answer. Not words. The land didn't have words. It had something that the journal had called recognition and that Harry, experiencing it directly, would have called yes, a vast, unhurried, bone-deep yes that went through him from feet to crown and left him standing in a slightly different version of himself on the other side. The ring pulsed once. Bright. Green gold. Then everything went back to looking exactly as it had before, except that it wasn't. He turned around. Hermione had both hands over her mouth. Neville was looking at the lake with an expression of pure wonder. "Did you feel that?" Neville asked. "Yes," Harry said. The whole grounds just, yes." Hermione lowered her hands. Her eyes were very bright. "It worked." "Yes." The whole Hogwarts grounds are now formally sovereign claimed under the Compact of the Sovereign Land, she said, as if by stating it precisely she could make it more real. That means any coercive ministry action taken on these grounds is subject to immediate sovereign challenge. That means Educational Decree 43 is functionally void here regardless of the 30-day review. That means, she stopped herself. Harry. I know. Umbridge can't touch anyone here. Not without me being able to remove her authority directly. He paused. Not without starting a fight with the Compact itself, which would be the oldest legal authority in Britain. Hermione made the half-laugh sound she'd made in the Ministry corridor last week. It was the sound of someone watching a chess game where an unexpected move has completely changed the board. Neville was still looking at the grounds with that quiet wonder. She's going to be furious, he said, with a satisfaction that was very unlike his usual careful manner. Yes, Harry agreed. Can I be there when she finds out? Front row seat, Harry said. Dumbledore was not in his office at midday. He was in the entrance hall. Harry came in through the main doors with Hermione and Neville behind him, and Dumbledore was standing at the base of the main staircase, in traveling robes, his half-moon glasses catching the light from the tall windows. He was not performing patience the way people perform it when they want to be seen waiting, he was simply standing there, still, in the way very old things are still. He looked at Harry. Harry looked back. Harry, Dumbledore said. His voice was exactly what it always was, warm, unhurried, carrying that quality of gentle command that Harry had spent 5 years interpreting as wisdom and now understood as something more complicated. Professor, Harry said. He glanced at Hermione and Neville. They exchanged a look with him and moved off toward the library with the naturalness of people who've been told without words that they should, and then Harry and Dumbledore were alone in the entrance hall with the summer light coming in from the high windows and the portraits pretending not to pay attention. Shall we go to my office? Dumbledore asked. Here is fine, Harry said. A slight pause. Yes, Dumbledore said. Here is fine. Harry walked to the stone bench along the far wall and sat on it and waited. Dumbledore crossed the hall and lowered himself into the chair that someone, a house elf, presumably, had placed with a discretion that suggested advanced planning, and for a moment they simply looked at each other across the entrance hall floor. Dumbledore spoke first. I owe you an explanation, he said. Yes, Harry said. You do. I'm going to give you one. I need you to hear it fully before you respond. Not because I'm asking you to agree with my choices, I am not, but because I want you to understand them completely, and I have a habit of explaining in stages, and if you respond to the first stage before I've reached the third, we'll both lose the thread. He paused. Will you hear me out? Harry looked at him. The old man's face was what it always was, kind and tired and enormously intelligent, but there was something else in it today. Something that Harry took a moment to identify and then recognized as the expression of a man who has been carrying a weight for a long time and has just accepted that he is about to set it down. Yes, Harry said. I'll hear you out. Dumbledore folded his hands in his lap. Outside, a bird called twice and went quiet. When your parents died, he said, I knew what you were. Not everything. The Sovereign Compact was something I learned of later, through research that was, shall we say, motivated by what I found when I first assessed you as an infant. But I knew the size of your potential. I knew what your mother's bloodline carried. I knew that if the wizarding world understood what had been born in that house in Godric's Hollow, the repercussions would be, he paused. Overwhelming. Dangerous. A child with your heritage, your claim, your power, would be a political object before he was old enough to understand politics. Would be sought, used, shaped, and sacrificed by a dozen competing interests before he reached his majority. Harry said nothing. He was listening. I made a decision, Dumbledore said. I make a great many decisions on behalf of other people, and I am aware that this is a failing as much as it is a quality. I decided to contain, for want of a better word, your inheritance. To give you a childhood. To give you the ordinary experience of growing up, learning magic at Hogwarts with your peers, developing your own character on your own terms, without the weight of 22 houses and a sovereign title pressing down on you from infancy. He paused. I believed I was protecting you. You were protecting your management of me, Harry said. Quiet. Not cruel, just exact. A pause. Yes, Dumbledore said. Those two things coexisted in my thinking, and I allowed myself to believe they were the same thing when they were not. The suppressions, Harry said. The ones you cast in 1991 and 1993. They weren't just about preventing the inheritance from activating. They were about keeping me manageable. Keeping me a weapon I didn't know I was. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. I preferred to think of you as something to be guided. A weapon implies indifference to the wielded. I never felt that. But you felt that your guidance was more important than my knowledge of my own life, Harry said. You decided what I should know and when I should know it and what I should be allowed to become. Yes. The straightforwardness of the admission landed differently than Harry had expected. He had prepared for rationalization, for the elegant defensive architecture of a man who was very good at making his choices sound like wisdom. Instead, Dumbledore was giving him something almost bare. Why? Harry said. What were you actually afraid of? Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. That you would be shaped by it before you were strong enough to resist the shaping, he said. That the world would make you into what it needed before you could decide what you wanted to be. I have seen it happen to remarkable people. Power without identity is, he paused. I have seen it make monsters. You were afraid I'd become Voldemort, Harry said. I was afraid you'd become me, Dumbledore said quietly. The entrance hall was very still. Harry sat with this. He turned it over and examined it and found in it something that he hadn't expected to find, not absolution, not exoneration, but something human. The particular shape of an old man's specific fear, worn down to its honest core. Grindelwald, Harry said. Dumbledore's face did something. I was young and brilliant and I was shown power and I chose it too eagerly. I told myself it was for the greater good. I told myself the people it would cost were acceptable costs. He paused. I have never entirely trusted brilliant young people with great power since then. Including myself. A pause. Including you. So you suppressed me, Harry said. To protect me from yourself. To protect you from the pattern, Dumbledore said. Which is not entirely different. Harry stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the grounds, the lawn, the lake in the distance, the land that had just answered him, that was sitting in its new settled awareness, and he thought about the 12 letters in the vault. He thought about his mother, who hadn't known. His father, who might have. He thought about the portrait of Phineas Nigellus in the headmaster's office that had always watched him with that particular cold interest. He turned around. Here's what I think, he said. I think you were right about one thing. I think if I'd been raised knowing what I was, it would have shaped me badly. Not necessarily toward Voldemort, I genuinely don't think I carry whatever he carried. But toward rigidity. Toward identity that was title rather than person. He paused. But you were wrong about the rest of it. The suppressions weren't about protecting me from power. They were about keeping me accessible to yours. Keeping me the boy who needed guidance rather than the person who could stand next to you as an equal. Dumbledore was quiet. I understand why you did it, Harry said. I'm telling you that understanding why and accepting it are different things. He looked at the old man directly. You suppressed my mother's inheritance from her. She never knew what she was. She could have been extraordinary in ways she never got to be, and she died without knowing it. He paused. I can forgive the things you did to me because I can see your reasons and I can see they weren't malicious. But what you took from her, what she never got to know about herself, I don't think that's mine to forgive. Dumbledore looked at him with something in his face that Harry had never seen there. Not the usual warmth. Not the weight of age and wisdom. Something raw. No, Dumbledore said. It isn't. I need something from you, Harry said. Not an apology. I need information. Everything you know about the Sovereign Compact, about my mother's line, about the blood suppression and what you found when you masked it. Everything you've been holding. He paused. I need it because Voldemort is coming and I need to understand what I actually am before he gets here. Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. Yes, he said. All of it. You can have all of it. Good. Harry. Dumbledore's voice was careful. I should tell you something that I have been reluctant to tell you, because the context has always seemed wrong. But you deserve to hear it now. He paused. You are not the boy who lived because of prophecy alone. You are the boy who lived because the oldest protective magic in Britain activated in your blood at the moment your mother died for you. The blood suppression did not come from Voldemort's killing curse. He paused. It was a response. When your mother's sacrifice activated the Sovereign Compact's deepest protection, the Compact of Blood, it created a resonance so powerful that your own blood suppressed the sovereign title. Not to hide it. To protect it. Harry stared at him. Your mother's love triggered the Compact, Dumbledore said. And the Compact buried itself in you to keep it safe. The blood suppression was not Voldemort's work and it was not mine. It was the land's. It wrapped itself around its own sovereign to protect him until he was ready. The silence in the entrance hall was total. Harry heard it. He sat with it. He found in it something that broke something open in his chest that had been shut for a long time, not painfully, or not only painfully, the way you open a window in a room that has been closed too long, the air from outside sharp and real and necessary. His mother had saved him. The land had wrapped around him to keep him. The suppression had not been a theft. It had been a cradle. And Dumbledore had found it and added his own layers on top because he thought the cradle should last longer than it needed to. You should have told me that, Harry said. His voice was steady. You should have told me that years ago. Yes, Dumbledore said. I should have. Why didn't you? Because telling you what your mother did would have meant telling you everything else. And I wasn't ready for you to know everything else. He paused. I was not ready to stop being the person who knew things you didn't. Harry looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, Are you ready now? Dumbledore met his eyes. Whether I am ready or not, you have outgrown my management. That is not a criticism of you. It is, I think, the best thing I have ever watched happen. He paused. I would like to help you. If you'll let me. Not as guardian. Not as guide. As an ally, Harry said. Someone who has information I need and is willing to share it. Yes. On my terms. Yes. Harry nodded. Then we can work together. He paused. But I need the counter-petition to stand. The documentation of your suppressions, it's going on the record. I know, Dumbledore said. It should. He paused. It will cause problems. For you. Yes. You'll survive them, Harry said, and it wasn't unkind. You're Albus Dumbledore. Something moved through the old man's face that was almost, not quite, a smile. There is also, Dumbledore said, reaching into his robes, something that belongs to you. I have been holding it in trust. I told myself it was not the right time. He withdrew a folded document and held it out. Your parents' vault key. Not the trust vault. The main vault. Gringotts sent it to me in 1981 with instruction to deliver it to you when, he paused. When you were ready. Gringotts gave me access directly, Harry said. I've already been inside. Dumbledore looked at the key in his hand. Ah. He paused. Of course they did. He lowered the key. How was it? There were letters, Harry said. From my parents. To me. He paused. They knew they might die. They wanted to make sure I knew things. He stopped for a moment. My mum called me their best adventure. In the letter. She said, he stopped. She said she hoped I'd be comfortable with being extraordinary. That she'd never been comfortable with it herself and she didn't want me to spend as long being uncomfortable as she had. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. Lily was, he stopped. She was not comfortable with it. You're right. She was extraordinary and it frightened her. He paused. You do not seem frightened. I was, Harry said. For about the first hour. Then it stopped. He looked at the ring. It just feels like mine. Like it was always mine and someone kept it in a separate room but now it's back and the room is full. Dumbledore looked at him with the expression of a man looking at something he didn't expect to see and finding it better than what he'd feared. Yes, he said quietly. Yes, I expect it does. They spent 3 hours in Dumbledore's office after that. Dumbledore told him everything. The full Peveril research, the Sovereign Compact history he'd uncovered, the specifics of what he'd found when he'd first assessed Harry as an infant and recognized the resonance. He told him about the blood suppression and what he'd understood about it and why he'd added his own layers, and Harry listened and asked questions and didn't let anything slide past without examination, and Dumbledore answered each question with a completeness that suggested he'd been waiting for the examination for some time. He also told Harry about the prophecy. All of it. The full text. Not the edited, managed version he'd been planning to deliver at some unspecified appropriate moment, but the actual words of the thing, and Harry listened to them and felt, not the crushing weight he might have expected, but something almost like impatience. It says neither can live while the other survives, he said, when Dumbledore finished. That's not a death sentence. That's a condition. It means the situation has to resolve, one way or the other, but it doesn't specify how. Dumbledore looked at him carefully. No, he said. It doesn't. It doesn't say I have to die to beat him. No. It doesn't say I can't use every legal and political and sovereign tool available to me to dismantle his infrastructure before we ever reach the point of a final confrontation. It does not say that either. Dumbledore's voice had something in it that was not quite lightness but was adjacent to it. I confess I spent a great deal of time focusing on the confrontation itself and less time thinking about the considerable space before it. I'm going to spend that space usefully, Harry said. I know, Dumbledore said. And then, I'm glad. Harry left at 4 in the afternoon, coming out of the gargoyle corridor to find Hermione and Neville waiting in the hallway with the expressions of people who have been in the library for 3 hours but have spent the last 20 minutes watching the corridor. Well? Hermione said. Harry looked at both of them. He thought about how to summarize 3 hours of the most honest conversation he'd ever had with Albus Dumbledore, and decided that a full summary could wait for the train back to London. He told me everything, Harry said. He's on our side. He's not in charge of our side, but he's on it. Neville let out a breath. Good. I was, yeah. Good. Hermione had a particular expression. How are you? I'm good, Harry said. Actually good. She searched his face. Then she nodded. They went back out through the main doors, down the stone steps, across the grounds. As Harry walked across the lawn the ring pulsed once, gently, the warmth of it familiar now, the land doing its slow attentive thing beneath his feet. The claim was settled. The Hogwarts grounds were his. Not to own, to protect. He had 4 days until term started. He thought about what needed doing before September 1st. The Avery counter-petition, which Ragnarok would file tomorrow and which would end Avery's legal challenge on the inheritance. The Selwyn and remaining proxy seat filings, which were already in progress. The Heritage Registry Act challenge, which Hermione had begun drafting and which was going to be one of the most significant things he filed all year, the kind of challenge that made enemies and made history simultaneously. The meeting with the full Wisengamot that was coming, where he would need to sit in 22 seats and hold them and not let the room manage him. And somewhere, moving carefully in the dark, Avery, who had lost his legal challenge, who was running out of ministry protection, who was positioning himself toward Voldemort and watching Harry's movements with the cold attention of a cornered man deciding whether to run or attack. The grounds were quiet and green and the lake lay still at their edge and the castle rose behind them warm with old stone. "Neville," Harry said, as they walked. "Your grandmother. She said Avery was responsible for giving up your parents' location." "Yeah," Neville said. He didn't look up. "She told me years ago but there was never anything we could do about it. No proof that the ministry would accept." "There will be," Harry said. "When my counter-petition files tomorrow, the Wisengamot record will include Gringotts' analysis of the dormancy declarations and the financial transfers. It creates a formal evidentiary trail. It doesn't prove the location thing directly but it establishes a documented pattern of Avery acting against members of the Order of the Phoenix." He paused. "It opens a door." Neville was quiet for a moment, watching the ground as he walked. "My mum, when she was having a good day," he said slowly, "she used to press sweet wrappers into my hand when I visited. Dragées de cristal, the silver ones. She could never remember my name but she'd see me and she'd dig in her pocket." He paused. "She knew something. Even like that. She knew I was someone who should have sweets." Harry said nothing. Some things didn't need response. "I want that door open," Neville said. "It's opening," Harry said. They reached the gate and passed through it, and as Harry touched the iron the ring pulsed once more, the land acknowledging the boundary, the edge of its claimed space, the old knowledge of where the protected ground ended and the wider world began. He had a war ahead of him. A real one, not a school year adventure but the proper kind, the kind that killed people and changed the shape of the world. He had an enemy who had been gathering power for 2 years and who was going to move properly, catastrophically, before long. He had a Wisengamot full of frightened and self-interested people who needed to be navigated, a ministry in denial, a Death Eater loose in the political system who was desperate and therefore dangerous. He also had 22 houses and the oldest legal title in Britain. He had an alliance with the most powerful wizard alive, freely given. He had the Hogwarts grounds claimed under a compact that predated every other legal structure in the country. He had Amelia Bones and Augusta Longbottom and Molly Weasley with their seats pointed in the right direction. He had Ragnarok, who was not his friend but was his ally, which in many ways was more reliable. He had Hermione on his left and Neville on his right and the knowledge, clear and certain, that he had not got here by being managed or protected or kept in the dark. He'd got here by walking into Gringotts on his birthday with a letter in his pocket and enough stubbornness to keep asking questions until he understood the answers. He turned back and looked at Hogwarts from the gate. The castle rose in the summer afternoon, old and enormous and very much itself, its towers catching the light, its grounds lying in the particular stillness of the newly claimed. "September 1st, Hermione said. "September 1st, he agreed. They walked down the path toward Hogsmeade, and behind them the Hogwarts gate swung shut with the particular resonance of something that knows it is protected, and the land beneath them settled deeper into its old, patient awareness, satisfied as it had not been satisfied in 1400 years. Chapter 6, The land remembers September 1st arrived the way important days always do, ordinary on the surface, the same platform, the same scarlet engine, the same smell of coal smoke and anticipation, the same chaos of trunks and owls and families saying goodbye, and underneath it, something different. A current running below the ordinary surface like deep water. Harry stood on platform 9 3/4 with his trunk and Hedwig's cage and the particular calm of someone who has spent a month becoming something new and is now carrying it into a familiar place for the first time. The Hogwarts Express steamed and hissed around him and the crowd moved with its usual organized chaos, and Ron was talking about the Chudley cannons and Ginny was watching Harry with the thoughtful attention she'd been directing at him since the Burrow visit, and Hermione had her regular year bag plus a second bag that was entirely made up of books Harry would need, organized by subject. Neville was with his grandmother on the platform edge. Augusta Longbottom, in her formidable autumn robes, was saying something to him in a low voice with her hands on his shoulders, and whatever she was saying made Neville stand straighter, which Harry would not have thought possible given that Neville already had the posture of someone who had spent a month at a manor being reminded of their noble house standing at regular intervals. The Hogwarts Express gave its warning whistle. Ron looked at Harry. "You going to tell me what's actually going on?" "Because Fred and George said something happened at the ministry and Mum went quiet for a whole evening and then she wasn't quiet at all for 3 days, on the train," Harry said. "All of it. I promise. They found a compartment." Harry, Ron, Hermione, Neville, Ginny, and, because Ginny had gone and collected her without asking anyone, which Harry appreciated, Luna Lovegood, who settled into the corner seat with her quibbler and her general quality of existing slightly adjacent to everyone else's reality, and said, without looking up, "Something's different about Harry." "Yes," Hermione said. "The ring," Luna said. "It's very old. It's pleased with itself." Harry looked at it. "I'll pass that along." Luna turned a page. "Also there are 3 Aurors in the next compartment who are trying very hard to look like students. They're not doing it well. One of them is 43. Ron looked at the compartment wall. "Aurors?" "Why, Dumbledore," Hermione said. "He arranged additional security. He told Harry about it last week." Ron turned back. "Right, so Dumbledore is now owling Harry about things." "Among other adjustments," Harry said. "He spent the first hour of the journey explaining. Not all of it, not the letters from his parents, not the vault and what it felt like standing there, not the full conversation with Dumbledore in the entrance hall. Those things were his and he was keeping them. But the shape of it, the inheritance, the 22 houses, the sovereign compact, the Wisingamot cession, Avery, the Hogwarts site claim, he laid it out clearly and in order and let the compartment absorb it." Ron went through several phases. He started with disbelief, moved through incredulity, paused at a very long silence when Harry mentioned House Pruitt and his mother, and then arrived at a kind of fierce, quiet pride that he expressed by looking out the window and saying nothing for 30 seconds and then turning back and saying, "Right. What do you need from me?" "Same thing I always need," Harry said. "Someone to tell me when I'm being an idiot." "Yeah, I can do that." Ginny was watching him with the same thoughtful expression she'd been wearing since the Burrow. "Avery," she said. "He's the one who, with Mum's brothers, yes. And you're going after him legally." "Legally first," Harry said. "His counter-petition collapsed 2 days ago. Ragnarok filed our response and the Wisingamot panel dismissed Avery's challenge in 20 minutes. He's lost 3 proxy seats and his inheritance claim has been publicly defeated on the record." He paused. "He's running out of legal options." "Which means he'll do something else," Ginny said. "Yes," Harry said. "I'm counting on it." Luna lowered her quibbler. "He's already done something," she said, with the conversational ease of someone reporting the weather. "Daddy had a report come in this week. Someone has been accessing the Azkaban visitor logs for October 1981. Looking at records of who visited the holding cells in the week after you-know-who fell." The compartment was quiet. "What's in the October 1981 holding cells?" Ron asked. "The Death Eaters who were brought in immediately after Voldemort fell," Neville said. His voice was very controlled. "Before the official trials. The ones who were held for preliminary questioning." He paused. "My parents were the Aurors who brought in several of them. Including Avery." Harry looked at him. "He's trying to find out what your parents said in their initial testimony." Before Bellatrix," Neville stopped. "Yes. The initial testimony from my parents could have included what they knew about Avery's specific actions. If he finds out what's in those records, he knows what he's exposed to. His jaw was set. If he gets to those records first and they disappear, they won't, Harry said. Ragnarok. He pulled out a small communication mirror, a Gringotts issue item that Ragnarok had given him at the end of August with the instruction to use it for urgent matters, and tapped the frame. Ragnarok's face appeared within a minute. He was at his desk, as always. Lord Potter. Ragnarok. Someone is accessing the Azkaban holding records from October 1981. Can Gringotts request an independent copy of the Frank and Alice Longbottom testimony from that period before those records are interfered with? A pause. Under the Noble House Compact, Gringotts has the right to request certified copies of any official record pertaining to members of an allied noble house for preservation purposes. House Longbottom is an allied house of record. Another pause. I will have the request filed within the hour. Thank you. One additional matter, Ragnarok said. Avery filed a ministry complaint this morning against the Gringotts counterpetition, claiming procedural misconduct. The complaint is without merit and will be dismissed, but it is worth noting that this is his fourth ministry filing in 3 days. He is using the filing process as intelligence gathering. Each filing generates a ministry response that tells him what we know and what we don't. Can we give him something to learn? Harry said. Ragnarok regarded him steadily. You mean feed him information through the official filings? If he's using the ministry response process to map our knowledge, we can include something in our next response that tells him what we want him to think we know. Harry paused. Something that moves him in a direction we've prepared for. What direction? He's heading toward Voldemort, Harry said. He needs to make himself useful before Voldemort's people question his loyalty. If he thinks we're about to expose his Azkaban-era testimony involvement, he'll move faster. Make a more direct approach to Voldemort's camp. He paused. Which gives us a defined timeline and a defined location for the approach. Neville was watching him with the expression of someone watching a completely different Harry Potter than the one they'd shared a common room with for 4 years. Ragnarok was quiet for a moment. I will draft the relevant language for our next filing. You can review it tonight. Good. The mirror went dark. Harry put it away. The compartment was quiet for a moment. When did you get scary? Ron asked. About 3 weeks ago, Hermione said, with great composure. Hogwarts was the same and not the same. The Great Hall, the staircases, the smell of stone and old magic, all of it was exactly as it had always been, and the sorting happened and first years were sorted and the feast appeared and the candles burned and Dumbledore stood and made his start-of-term remarks. Standard. Familiar. The same rhythms of the beginning of year that Harry had moved through 4 times before. And underneath it, the difference. The grounds that knew him. The stones that had answered. The land beneath everything that had been settling into its new awareness for 3 weeks and that now, with Harry physically present within the claimed boundaries for the first time, did something that was not quite a greeting but was adjacent to it, a warmth that ran from the stone under his feet up through the hall and back down, the land taking stock. Nobody else felt it. He was relatively certain of that. Or rather, the castle itself responded, in its usual subtle way, doors and staircases doing their accommodating things slightly more readily than usual, the great hall candles burning with a warmth that was specifically gold rather than white. Nothing dramatic. The Hogwarts magic adjusting to its new context. Professor McGonagall, from the staff table, caught his eye. Her expression was entirely composed. She gave him one small nod. He returned it. The feast ended. Students moved toward their dormitories. And then, at the door of the great hall, in the brief crush of bodies and noise, Dolores Umbridge appeared. She was small and broad and pink and she moved with the particular deliberate quality of someone who had been very carefully briefed on the situation they were walking into and had decided to treat it as a temporary inconvenience. She was wearing teaching robes in a shade of pink that managed to be both aggressively cheerful and vaguely threatening, and she had the expression of someone who has been told they cannot do something and has decided the information is irrelevant. She looked at Harry. Harry looked at her. She smiled. "Mr. Potter. I look forward to having you in my defense against the dark arts class." "Professor Umbridge," Harry said. "I hope we'll be able to work together productively despite," she paused, letting the pause carry implications, "recent misunderstandings." "There's been no misunderstanding," Harry said, pleasantly. "The educational decree review is running. The Hogwarts site sovereign claim is filed and acknowledged. Your teaching appointment is unaffected by either of those, you can teach defense. But any ministry oversight authority you've been given doesn't operate on these grounds." He held her gaze. "I wanted to say that directly so there was no confusion later." Her smile didn't move. Her eyes did. They went sharp and still the way eyes do when the surface expression and the internal calculation have separated. "The ministry's authority at Hogwarts is a matter of law, Mr. Potter." "The compact's authority at Hogwarts is older than law," Harry said, just as pleasantly. "Good evening, Professor." He walked past her and up the stairs, and behind him the great hall doors swung shut with a sound that was, to his ears at least, slightly more final than usual. She tried on the third day. It wasn't subtle and Harry had expected it not to be. Subtlety in her position was a luxury she'd spent on the first 3 days of making nice. On the third day, during a defense against the dark arts lesson that Harry was attending with Ron and Hermione and which was, as expected, entirely theoretical, she assigned him a detention. The pretext was thin. He'd stated, when asked if Voldemort was dangerous, that Voldemort was extremely dangerous because he was alive and had a body and had killed Cedric Diggory 6 weeks ago. She'd informed him that stating falsehoods in class was a detainable offense. He'd looked at her for a moment and said that stating facts wasn't a detainable offense regardless of her preference regarding the content of those facts. She'd given him a week's detention. He'd nodded and said he'd be filing a sovereign challenge against the detention under compact protection of truthful testimony. Not loudly. Just informatively. The class had been extremely quiet. The detention never manifested. By the following morning there was a ministry notice in Umbridge staff pigeonhole. He didn't read it, but McGonagall told him about it later with a composure that was doing a great deal of work, indicating that pending the educational decree review, disciplinary action towards students was subject to oversight by the deputy headmistress and required co-signature. Fudge, for all his faults, had apparently decided that a direct confrontation with the Sovereign Compact over a school detention was not the fight he wanted on his record. Umbridge's expression for the rest of that week was a study in managed fury. She taught her lessons. She smiled her smile. She did not give Harry another detention, and Harry sat in her classes and answered questions directly and made no particular effort to be difficult beyond the specific difficulty of being entirely, calmly honest at all times, which was, it turned out, considerable. The Avery situation moved the second week of September. Harry was in the library with Hermione and Neville on Wednesday evening when the communication mirror went warm in his pocket. He took it out and Ragnarok's face was already there. "He's made contact," Ragnarok said. "Our source in the ministry, the one monitoring the Azkaban access request, has confirmed that Avery had a meeting yesterday afternoon with Walden McNair. McNair was an executioner here and has since been identified as a Voldemort liaison." A pause. The meeting was in the ministry. In the Department of Magical Creatures, where McNair still holds a nominal post. "Right in the open," Harry said. "He has nowhere to hide at the moment. His usual back channels are compromised, the proxy seats are gone, his ministry allies are keeping their distance pending the outcome of the evidentiary filings, and he knows we have people watching his formal communications." Ragnarok paused. The meeting with McNair lasted 45 minutes. "We believe he was making his offer of services. Ministry access, intelligence on ministry operations, your movements." "What did he tell them about me?" "We don't know the specifics. But we know what information he has access to, which is limited by design. Ragnar's voice was measured. 3 weeks ago we ensured that every filing accessible to Avery through the Ministry response process contained only information we were comfortable with Voldemort receiving. His intelligence on you is several weeks stale and painted in the colors we chose. What does Voldemort think he knows about me? That you are a political actor using inherited legal mechanisms. That your power is institutional rather than personal. That the Sovereign Compact is a useful legal tool but not a military threat. Ragnar paused. He does not know about the site claim. He does not know about the land connection. He does not know about the full scope of the Compact's protective provisions. That information was kept entirely out of any filing Avery could access. Harry nodded. So Voldemort thinks I'm a politician. A 15-year-old politician with good lawyers, Ragnar said, drily. Let him think that. Harry looked at Neville and Hermione, who were both leaning forward. Ragnar, the Azkaban records, Frank and Alice Longbottom's testimony. Did we get them? Certified copies are secured in Gringotts' vault 3 days ago. A pause. The originals in the Ministry archive were accessed and partially altered 2 days after our copy was made. Whoever altered them removed 3 paragraphs from Alice Longbottom's initial statement. Our certified copy has those paragraphs intact. Neville's hand, flat on the library table, went very still. What do they say? Neville asked. Quietly. Ragnar glanced at Harry. Harry looked at Neville. Do you want to read them? A long pause. Neville looked at the table. Then he looked up and his eyes were steady. Yes. But not tonight. After we've dealt with Avery. After, Harry agreed. He looked back at Ragnar. The filing tomorrow. The one exposing the Azkaban record alteration, that goes forward. Ready to file at 9 tomorrow morning. Good. Include the comparison between the original certified copy and the altered official version. Side by side. Make it impossible to misread. He paused. And include the McNair meeting information. We don't have the specific content of the conversation, but we can document that Avery met with a known Voldemort liaison at the Ministry on Ministry premises while under active investigation by the Wizengamot. That's obstruction compounded by conspiracy, Hermione said, quietly, her quill already moving. If he met with McNair to pass Ministry intelligence to a classified dark wizard, that's conspiracy to endanger the British magical population. That's not a fine and a caution. That's Azkaban. The word landed in the library with the weight it deserved. Yes, Harry said. Neville was looking at the table. The library firelight moved across his face in shifting patterns and he was very quiet and very still, and Harry let the quiet stand. Then Neville said, do it. The Wizengamot emergency session was called for Friday. Harry went with Augusta and Amelia Bones and the 5 other available heads of his allied houses. Not all 22 had active representatives to send, but 7 was more than enough. 7 seats all pointing the same direction was a voting bloc that hadn't existed in the chamber 2 weeks ago. He wore the charcoal robes again and the sovereign's ring, and he sat in the primary Potter seat at the front of the chamber and looked at Avery across the floor. Avery had lawyers. 3 of them, good ones, ministry-connected men in formal robes who were going to argue procedural points and technicalities and do everything in their power to introduce delay. Harry had Ragnar, who was not technically permitted in the Wizengamot chamber but was present as Gringotts' legal representative by specific invitation. Madame Bones had done the paperwork with a brevity that suggested she'd been looking forward to doing it, and who sat to Harry's right with the still patience of someone who has done this before and knows how it ends. The session opened. Madame Bones was presiding. Fudge was in his ministerial seat looking the way he'd looked every time Harry had seen him this month, a man watching events move at a pace he'd lost control of, trying to calculate whether to run toward them or away. The charges were read. Avery's legal team rose immediately with their procedural motion. Harry let them make it, let them speak for 4 full minutes about the irregularity of Gringotts certified copies as primary evidence, about the chain of custody for the Azkaban records, about the question of whether the McNair meeting constituted conspiracy absent recording of its content. Madame Bones gave them their 4 minutes. Then she turned to Harry. He stood. The certified copies were made under Goblin banking law with full chain of custody documentation, which is internationally recognized as superior to Ministry archive standards, he said. The comparison between the certified copy and the altered official version is self-evidencing. The alteration occurred after our copy was made and the alteration clearly benefits the subject of the current investigation. This is not a contested point of evidence. It's a documented fact. He paused. As for the McNair meeting, Walden McNair was identified as a Voldemort liaison in the classified Ministry report of August 1996, a report that several members of this chamber have read and that the Ministry has declined to make public, which is a separate issue I'll address in a separate filing. Avery met with him for 45 minutes on Ministry premises while under active Wisengamot investigation. He was asked about this meeting by the Auror office yesterday and declined to provide any account of its content. He looked at the chamber. Innocent people explain themselves. Guilty people file procedural motions. Avery's lead lawyer was on his feet. Madame Bones, sit down, Madame Bones said. She didn't raise her voice. The evidence is sufficient for a formal charge. We will proceed to, Madame Bones. Avery himself stood. He was controlled. Still patrician, still silver-haired, still wearing the expression of a man accustomed to being the most formidable presence in a room. But something was different from the first session he'd been calculating, assessing. Now he was something else. Stripped of his proxy seats, his legal challenge defeated, his alternative route to Voldemort documented and now public, he was the thing that Harry had recognized 3 weeks ago, a man running out of moves. Lord Potter, Avery said, and he was addressing Harry directly, ignoring the chamber's protocol, the lawyers, Madame Bones. You have done impressive work. In a short time. He paused. You understand what you've stepped into. You understand this isn't over. I know, Harry said. He will come, Avery said. And when he does, your compact and your legal mechanisms and your Gringotts documentation will not be sufficient. You are a child playing at governance while something genuinely terrible gathers strength. I know, Harry said again. Then you know that every minute you spend in this chamber is a minute not spent preparing for what's coming. Harry looked at him for a moment. He had the full attention of the chamber, every purple robe, every face, Fudge and Bones and the allied houses behind him and Dumbledore in the chief warlock's seat, which he'd occupied today for the first time this session. Lord Avery, Harry said. You spent 20 years building a position of safety. Embedded in institutions, protected by influence, useful to both sides so that whatever happened you'd survive it. You told yourself it was intelligent. Strategic. He paused. What it was a way of never having to choose. Of never having to stand on one side of a line and say, this is who I am and this is what I think is right. He paused. I'm 15 years old and I know which side of the line I'm on. I've known since I was 11 and I watched Voldemort try to kill a unicorn. It doesn't take wisdom to know the difference between right and wrong. It just takes the willingness to act on it. He held Avery's gaze. Your preparation for what's coming was 20 years of building leverage over people who were weaker than you. Mine is everything in this room and everything behind me and the oldest legal authority in Britain. He paused. I think my preparation is better. Avery was very still. Then he sat down. Madame Bones called the vote. The charges were upheld 12-4, the 4 dissenting votes being Avery's remaining allies, and Avery was taken into ministry custody pending trial. He looked at Harry once more as the Aurors flanked him. The look was not angry. It was complicated. The look of a man who has just watched his life's work come undone at the hands of someone who wasn't supposed to exist. Harry met the look steadily and didn't look away until Avery was through the chamber doors. That evening Harry went to the grounds alone. Not for any specific purpose, no invocation, no legal mechanism. He walked out through the main doors and down the stone steps and across the lawn in the September dark, the sky above clear and cold and brilliant with stars, the lake a black mirror at the ground's edge. He walked to the place he'd stood 3 weeks ago when he'd made the site claim, the center of the lawn, and he stopped and looked up. The land was quiet beneath him. Not absent, never absent now, but settled, the way it settled after something significant had resolved, a deep attentive quiet that was not empty but full, like a room after music. He thought about Avery being processed into ministry custody. He thought about the Frank and Alice Longbottom testimony in Gringotts' vault, those 3 recovered paragraphs that Neville hadn't read yet and would read when he was ready, that might finally give the Longbottom family something the law had failed to give them for 20 years. He thought about Susan Bones holding her family's seat. He thought about Molly Weasley and the silver dragée wrappers in a hospital room. He thought about his mother. Small handwriting. Words underlined. Their best adventure. He thought about the ring on his hand and the thing it had said, I am the voice. I am the memory. I am the anger of the land. He'd been thinking about that line differently these past few weeks. The anger had always been the part that sounded dangerous, the thing to manage or suppress. But standing here now in the dark with everything that had happened in the past month sitting settled in his chest, he understood it differently. The land's anger wasn't destructive. It was the anger of something enormous and patient that had watched injustice for a long time and was no longer willing to. Not the rage that burned things down. The anger that gets up and does something about it. He heard footsteps behind him and turned. Neville was crossing the lawn. He was carrying 2 cups of something warm and he handed one to Harry without comment and they stood together in the dark looking at the lake. After a while Neville said, I read the testimony. Harry looked at him. The 3 paragraphs. Neville wrapped both hands around his cup. My mum testified that Avery had given the Death Eaters their location. That she'd seen him at the scene before it happened and he'd pointed. Just pointed at the door. Like they needed to know which room. He paused. She described his face. Said he looked bored. Harry was quiet. 20 years, Neville said. She's in St. Mungo's and he's been sitting in the Wisengamot acting like a person. He paused. He looked bored. He's in custody now, Harry said. I know. Neville's voice was steady. I know that. And the testimony is on the record. And it'll go to trial and, I know. He paused. I don't know what I thought I'd feel. I thought it would feel bigger. It'll get bigger, Harry said. When there's a trial. When someone reads that testimony out loud in a room where it matters. Yeah. Neville was quiet for a moment. Gran cried. When I owed her tonight. I've never seen her cry. Harry thought about Augusta Longbottom's composed face in the Gringotts meeting room. The sharp precision of her grief managed into purpose. She's been carrying that for 20 years too, Harry said. Yeah. A pause. Thank you. For the records. For all of it. It's what the seats are for, Harry said. That's the point of all of it. Not the title. Not the political position. The Pruitt seat, the Bones seat, the Wisengamot filing, it's all just mechanism. The point is what you can do with the mechanism. Neville looked at him. You sound like you've been thinking about that a lot. Every day for a month, Harry said. They stood in companionable quiet for a while. The lake was still. The stars moved in their slow enormous arcs above the castle. The land breathed beneath them. Voldemort's going to move, Neville said eventually. Not as a worry. As a statement of the situation. Yes. Soon. Not immediately. He's rebuilding. Gathering people. But before this year is out, something will happen. Harry looked at the dark water. I'm going to be ready. We're going to be ready, Neville said. Harry looked at him. The boy who'd been afraid of Professor Snape, who'd almost been sorted into Hufflepuff, who pressed plants into the soil with the careful attention of someone who understood that things needed time and patience to become what they were meant to be. Standing here in the September dark with his cup of tea and his settled, quiet determination. Yeah, Harry said. We are. The castle doors opened behind them and a beam of warm light spilled down the steps and Hermione's voice carried across the grounds with the confidence of someone who knows exactly where the two people she's looking for have gone. If you're both standing at the lake being meaningful, dinner is getting cold. We're coming, Harry called back. You've been coming for 10 minutes, she said. Neville made a sound that was almost a laugh. Harry turned away from the lake and they walked back across the grounds toward the warm light of the open doors, the stars wheeling above them and the land quiet and settled and deeply, finally, content beneath their feet. 3 days after the Wisengamot session, Harry received 2 letters. The first was from Ragnarok. Short, in the precise Gringotts script. The Heritage Registry Act challenge has been filed. Review period commenced today. 37 Muggle-born witches and wizards have already contacted Gringotts' legal office seeking representation in associated cases. The Chamber is taking note. The second was from a name he didn't recognize, a formal ministry address, senior department letterhead, and when he read it twice and then folded it carefully and put it in his robes. It was from Amelia Bones' office. A formal legal notification, the kind that went on record. The Avery trial date had been set. The certified Gringotts testimony of Frank and Alice Longbottom had been accepted as primary evidence. The prosecution was requesting that Harry James Potter, Lord of 22 Houses and holder of the Cursed King title under the Compact of the Sovereign Land, be present in the chamber as a material witness. As a material witness and as a representative of the house that had uncovered the evidence. Not as a symbol. Not as the boy who lived. As the Lord of the Houses whose legal work had made the prosecution possible. He folded the letter. He looked at the ring on his right hand, the sovereign's ring, warm and specific and alive in the morning light, the stone moving through its slow colors, dark and green and the nameless depth below both. Outside the library window the Hogwarts grounds lay in their early September gold, the trees beginning their slow seasonal turn, the lake catching the light. His grounds. His Hogwarts, in the deep specific way of the compact, not the institutional school, not the Board of Governors building, but the old place beneath the institution, the 5th century claimed land that had been waiting for its sovereign longer than anyone in the school had been alive. He thought about Voldemort, moving in the dark somewhere beyond these grounds. Rebuilding. Patient in the way that dangerous things are patient, the patience of something that believes it has already won and is just managing the timeline. He thought about what was coming. The war that wasn't a school adventure. The real thing, the kind that would cost people, that would require everything he had and probably more. He thought about his parents' letters in the vault. His mother's underlined words, his father's margin sketches. The 12 letters they'd written in case they didn't survive, and the specific extraordinary thing they'd done with that possibility, not fear, not farewell, but the deliberate and careful act of making sure their son would know who he was. The things he was. What he was capable of. What they hoped for him. We hope you'll be comfortable with being extraordinary. He put the letters in his robes beside Amelia Bones' notification and picked up his defense text and went to class. Umbridge was going through the theoretical applications of shield charms, no practical component, no wands out, the usual structured absence of anything that might actually be useful. The class settled into its rows and she opened her notes with her fixed smile and looked out at them. Her eyes found Harry and stopped. He met her gaze with complete calm. She looked away first. He opened his textbook to the relevant chapter and read, and outside the castle windows the grounds lay green and gold in the September light, and the land beneath everything turned in its deep awareness with the patience of something that has waited 1400 years and has finally, irrevocably, found its voice.